Good evening and welcome to this meeting of full council on the 7th of October 2024. Please note that this meeting is recorded and live streamed in the interests of public accountability. Please ensure that there are no interruptions from your electronic devices. Members, you may leave and return to the meeting if required, but please indicate to the clerk if you will not be returning. In the event of any tied vote this evening, I have the casting vote as Lord Mayor and reserve the right to use it. We begin with apologies for absence. Jonathan, are there any apologies?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I can confirm we've received apologies from Councillors Andrew Gant and Councillor Chris Jarvis, and I'll also know that Councillor Ross Smith will be arriving late.
Thank you, Jonathan. Do members have any further apologies? Councillor Smoton?
Councillor Garland also is running late, so he'll be here shortly.
Thank you. Any more? Councillor Upton? Okay. Is it any more? Councillor Mundy.
Hospital Jafari Malvini is on the bus, but she's on her way.
Thank you very much. Those apologies for late arrival. We proceed to declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations on any item in the agenda? Seeing none, we move on to the minutes of the last ordinary meeting of council, which was held on the 15th of July. Are there any points on the minutes? Any corrections? Seeing none, can we please approve the minutes of the correct record? Those in favour? Thank you. Item 4 is appointments to committees. I believe there are a couple. Councillor Brown.
Sorry, I wasn't working this microphone. Yes, I would just like to move the report which recommends some changes, I believe, to the Green Group's committee allocations.
Thank you. Councillor Muddin, are you happy to second?
Yes, I'll second that.
Any points on this agenda? I believe this is merely for noting. Oh no, we have to agree the appointments to committees. So is everybody happy to do that? All those in favour? That's everyone. Thank you very much. We now proceed to announcements. First it says the Lord Mayor, and I still have to remind myself that that's me. I must begin by noting that today is the anniversary of the appalling terrorist attack in Israel 1 year ago. I think of those who lost their lives that day and all those who have lost their lives since in Gaza and Lebanon. Last night, a united vigil in Bond Square gave witness to Oxford's desire for peace. I believe that the leader will speak in a moment on behalf of all of Council. On the last solemn note, I've attended many events since I last saw you all, far too many to mention, otherwise we'd be here till midnight, but I would like to mention 3 in particular. First, of course, celebrating the promotion of Oxford United in my first week in office. I really couldn't have ordered it better. We're up and we're staying up, whatever people in Swindon think. Second, having the opportunity to meet many of those providing nutritious food for free to over 200 community groups across Oxford and Oxfordshire, based just across the council boundary in Botley, including former council planner Murray, whom longer-standing members will recall, and Gary Smith, son of Pickering, whose portrait is on our wall. Gary told me how every member of his family is now involved in some way in feeding the hungry. Someone once said that a good activist should be like a radiator, spreading the values of community and human solidarity to all around them, and Pickering Smith was certainly that, and that is why we have her portrait there. Thank you, Councillor Mars, and her portrait overlooking us today. Thirdly, it was a pleasure to receive this generous gift from the British section of the Non-Resident Indians Welfare Society. It will remain in the town hall. It's a particularly appropriate memento for a cycling city, which also was visited twice by Mahatma Gandhi, who is shown on his bike on the sculpture. On one of those occasions, Mahatma said, "You can only give yourself with a disciplined conscience." A good motto for councillors in general, and hopefully for our deliberations this evening. We now move on to announcements by the Deputy Lord Mayor. Tiago?
It's on that.
Wrong button, sorry. Yes, I want to mention the two events I attended in the last two weeks. One was a charity funding dinner organized by Play to Give to support Oxford Children's Hospital and Oxford Head Injury Service and Disabled House. Also, yesterday was the annual Darshan TR dinner of the Nepalese community dinner, but it was one opportunity to celebrate our diversity and united in Oxford. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just over a week ago was maybe the high point, certainly one of them, of the Sheriff's year, which was the roundup on Port Meadow. It was wonderfully flooded, and so my Wellington boots ended up full of water. But we whizzed around in a four-wheel drive and did eventually round up all the cattle, who you may not know are now mainly rounded up, I believe, to test for TB. Unfortunately, none of them tested positive. I was going to thank Councillor Sanderson for coming and doubling the number of councillors who were present. So it was a rather damp affair in every sense, but it should be honoured, and maybe next year it'll be dry and much better event. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Although I must say that in my day, the cows just saw the glory of the sheriff's chain and walked obediently into the house. Leader Susan, I believe you have some announcements.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do. I have three areas to cover. One announcement, a statement on the local plan, and a statement on the international situation. So first, the announcement, which relates to champions. So firstly, Councillor Mary Clarkson continues as our heritage champion and will continue to liaise with Councillor Louise Upton in that role. She'll be joined by Councillor Mark Ligo as our Armed Forces and Veterans champion, and he will work with me on our role in the Oxfordshire Civilian Military Partnership and with Councillor Linda Smith on work with our wider communities. This is the first time we have met since we heard the extremely devastating news that our local plan will have to be delayed. So I wanted to make a statement to Council about that. We're alarmed and extremely disappointed by the recommendation to withdraw our local plan 2040 from public examination. We are still digesting that information and deciding on next steps. The planning inspectors failed to grasp the seriousness of Oxford's housing crisis and the number of new homes we need to tackle this crisis. And they also do not appear to have heeded the clear message from government which requires all councils to up their housing delivery ambitions. The logical outcome of the inspectors' conclusions will be a delay to proactively plan for the homes we need. The reality is that while the city councils are builders, there are others elsewhere who are blockers. Waiting for a situation where all councils in Oxfordshire are agreed on housing numbers and cross-boundary matters is just not realistic. That's why, thankfully, our new government is planning the reintroduction of mandatory housing delivery targets. Our approach to the number of houses that we need has not changed since our last successful local plan. The way in which we carried out that test has changed, but not the need for a larger number of houses than the standard test. Yet we are being told that this time there are no exceptional circumstances and that we should continue to use the current standard method, the one that we already rejected in our last local plan and has been rejected by the new government, for working out how many homes we need. This would mean fewer homes being built and far fewer than we actually need, and it's a U-turn from our previous local plan, where inspectors agreed Oxfordshire's exceptional circumstances justified the need for more homes. The current standard method is not fit for purpose and flies in the face of the government's policy intention to overhaul a broken national planning system and deliver 1.5 million homes. The current standard method doesn't even take account of population increases that have already happened in Oxford and across Oxfordshire, recorded in the census. Using this discredited method to calculate how many homes we need would make the city's housing crisis worse. We also strongly dispute the finding we have not met the duty to cooperate. We have a long-standing history of working collaboratively with neighbouring councils and other stakeholders on planning issues affecting Oxfordshire, including during the preparation of this plan. This finding relates to a single 5-month period in 2022 after the collapse of the Oxfordshire Plan 2050 that involved all 5 district councils. Let us not forget that plan was collapsed because South Oxfordshire and the Vale of White Horse chose to withdraw their cooperation. In the subsequent period, we were working with Charwell District Council to commission a Housing and Employment Needs Assessment, HENAR, as a joint evidence base for our respective plans. Oxfordshire's other districts declined the invitation to take part in this project, however, they were offered the opportunity to engage with the findings of the work. The duty to cooperate is not a duty to agree, nor should it be a charter for those who object the loudest to be able to block the building of desperately needed homes. While the Council strongly disputes the inspector's findings, as it is confident it engaged appropriately with neighbouring councils, the National Planning Framework gives no way for us to appeal the inspector's findings. We also think that the inspectors have failed to read the room on planning reform. The new government intends to reintroduce mandatory housing targets and bring in new ways of calculating how many homes we need. National consultation has just closed on proposals that would see a 59% increase in the number of homes that would need to be delivered in Oxfordshire, which we welcome. This will help us get closer to building the new homes so desperately needed locally. We will continue to explore all options open to us to ensure that we can build the houses that Oxford so desperately needs. We continue to wish to be builders of homes, not blockers, and are proud of our record on building homes, particularly council and other genuinely affordable homes. And our officials will continue to talk to government officials to try and find a way through. Finally, and very seriously and soberly, we are meeting today on the 7th of October 2024. We are a year on from the attacks on the 7th of October last year, which triggered such devastating loss of life across the region of the Middle East. Last night, I was privileged to attend our second peace vigil that was held jointly with the Oxfordshire Council of Faiths. We came together in large numbers as we did last November. Sadly, since that time, countless further lives have been lost, particularly in Gaza. And now conflict has spread, not ceased. Many, many families are mourning the loss of loved ones. Terrible injuries have changed lives. Many families have lost their homes. The suffering is terrible. Yesterday, at the Peace Vigil, we came together to support each other, people of all faiths and none. We celebrated and recognised all of Oxford's many diverse communities. In Oxford, we are rightly proud of our welcoming, multicultural and compassionate city. The terrible loss of life in Israel, Gaza and now Lebanon has shocked and appalled us all. We need peace. We are conscious that many people in our local communities are grieving for loved ones or are worried about friends and relations in Gaza, Israel, Lebanon and Iran, as well as other conflicts in the world such as Sudan and Ukraine. A year on, I also want to say that nobody should experience fear in our city as a result of international events. No one should feel worried to wear a symbol of their faith or culture, whether that's a hijab or a Star of David. Oxford City Council stands shoulder to shoulder with people from all communities in our city and county, coming together in peace and solidarity, irrespective of their faith or background. Today, we once again fly our city flag at half-mast to mark our sorrow at the war, destruction and loss of life in Gaza, Israel, Lebanon and elsewhere in the world, and in the hope of peace. I pledge today to continue to work with all of our faith communities to ensure that hate and prejudice have no place here, and that people of all faiths and none, and of every background, feel safe, welcome, and at home. And Lord Mayor, I think it would be appropriate for us to hold a moment of silence.
Thank you, Susan. Members, please rise for 1 minute silence. Thank you. Please be seated. City Rector, do you have any announcements?
Thank you so much, Lord Mayor. Thank you, everybody. Lovely to be here. Very moving words, if I may say, Councillor Brown. And if I may go to a slight tangent, I was thinking this weekend that all of us have to face so many different anniversaries in our personal lives, as well as noting big public anniversaries like this. And I was thinking last night how we handle those anniversaries as the years go by say so much about us as people. And I'm conscious that for me, 1 year I may handle an anniversary in one way, another year in another way, and that's okay. And sometimes someone else will handle an anniversary in a different way than I might, and that's okay too. But as I handle the big anniversaries in my life, and indeed these huge public anniversaries like today, what do I do? How do I cope? How do I make sure I mark it well? And I landed last night back on St. Paul's words, that in all my reactions, there needs to be love, and there needs to be hope. And for many of us, there needs to be faith. Where is the faith? Where is the love? Where is the hope in my reactions, in my anniversaries? As I say, we all handle our own anniversaries in different ways, and no doubt among us tonight, there are some for whom there are personal, important anniversaries this very week or month. How do we mark those? How do we handle those? My apologies, everybody. As I said to the Lord Mayor, I need to run away quite soon to a school governors meeting. It actually gives me joy going to those, knowing that I leave the City Council, whose interest and commitment to the next generation is so powerful and so strong. What you do matters so much. And what Susan said about compassion and kindness, we need to share that on. And thank you so much for all that you do to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Are there any announcements with exec? Finance? Legal? No? Good. Yes.
Can I just make a note that the word Palestine wasn't mentioned? Gaza, the genocide in Gaza is part of the occupation of Palestine, which is a place, and we need to make that note that it is Palestine that is occupied, that is undergoing the genocide. Thank you.
Stop the genocide.
Thank you, councillors. We now move on to committee recommendations. The statement of gambling licensing policy, and I believe this is Councillor Miles to the first.
Thank you very much. So before you today's a revised draft statement of gambling and licensing policy, and this is following a public consultation. Just by way of background, the council is obliged to determine and publish a statement of gambling and licensing policy, keep it under review and renew it at least every 3 years. Now the current policy is due to expire in 2025, and so we have to implement a new policy by the 31st of January next year. Consultation took place, this public consultation, in line with the statutory process. It was a 6-week consultation, and it was advertised between the 14th of June 2024 to the 26th of July 2024. I'd like to just note that despite advertising the consultation, only one response was received from the Thames Valley Police, who had no adverse comments made on the revised policy. This revised statement takes into consideration new guidance from the Gambling Commission issued in 2021. It also includes changes such as an amendment to the local authority and addresses, an amended map of Oxford with the new ward names and boundaries, and some minor text. It's really very minor, the changes. Committee members looked at these changes at last meeting on the 23rd of September and agreed to the revised draft statement. And to reassure members, so I know some concerns have been raised, the policy retains Oxford's status as a casino-free city. That was in the it is in the existing policy. So I'd like to thank officers for their hard work in organising the public consultation, and I'd like to recommend to members that they and the council to agree the revised draft statement following this public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Are there any points on this statement? Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want a clarification on the monitoring office. I didn't see anything to do with the taxis, the taxi driver. I believe it was gambling, right?
Emma? Emma, the question was that this statement does not concern taxi licensing in any way. No, good, thank you. Anything further?
It's just under a different act, the tax
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's why we have two separate licensing committees. No further contributions. Good, in which case we are called upon to agree the revised draft statement gambling licensing policy following public consultation. All those in favour?
Lord Mayor, I'm not sure it's been seconded,
Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Chris. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. Thank you. That is agreed. We now proceed to item 8. This report contains exempt information pursuant to paragraph 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. We can proceed with this item in open session as long as there are no questions or contributions touching on that exempt information. Does any member have any contributions touching on the exempt information within the report? I'm seeing none. Good. In which case we can proceed with the report, although there will be a limited amount that we'll be able to say about it. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So this report sets out Chief Executive's proposals for changes to the senior officer structure. That has been discussed in consultation with all group leaders. The new structure is designed to deliver management cost savings while building a broader leadership team and to improve decision making. And Council is being asked to approve this because of the pay structure involved. The only other thing that I need to put out into the open agenda is that this is because of the changes to the management structure. We need to formally reappoint Nigel Kennedy as the Council's Section 151 officer and Louise Chapman as the Council's monitoring officer within the revised management structure, and obviously that does need to be in the open agenda. So can we, I therefore move the report with those two things to be flagged up on the open agenda.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Smoten, would you like to speak? No. Taking account of what I said, does any member have anything to say on items that are on the open agenda? No? Good. it, in which case the motion is proposed and seconded. We are asked to agree the report. Can I see all those in favour? Thank you. Any against? And any abstentions? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 9, questions on Cabinet minutes. The item has a time limit of 15 minutes, and we have only one set of Cabinet minutes in front of us, the draft minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on the 11th of September. Do any members have points to raise? Seeing none. Wow, that is unusual. Thank you very much. We now therefore move to item 10, which is questions on notice from members of council. I will go through, we have 53 questions, so please be as concise as possible. I will go through them in order. And the first is unusually a question to myself from Councillor Muddiman. Councillor Muddiman, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. A few things. Firstly, I think there might be an error where you say that the city rector is historic and purely formal appointment. I think perhaps that's meant to be informal appointment. Not sure. No, it is meant to be formal. Just checking. That was part of my first, whether it is a formal or informal appointment. I know it's not in the Constitution, so I just wanted to double check that. And secondly, thank you for your responses. I don't think you've actually answered my question, and I'm now a little bit confused, bearing in mind the comments that were good comments, you know, which we all agree with, that I've just heard from both the city rector, thank you, and from Councillor Brown, who I'm just going to quote. She said, Oxford is a place where all people of all faiths and none should feel safe, welcome, and at home. And given that, which I think is a statement we can all agree with, I don't quite understand why you're not able to answer the question. So I'm just going to put it to you again. Do you agree that our great diversity should be reflected in these chambers by inviting representatives from different belief systems and none to speak at the start of each full council meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Muddiman. Looking around me, I do believe the great diversity of the city is reflected in these chambers by people of all beliefs and none. When I said that the city rector is a purely formal appointment, I meant purely a matter of form. It's not in the Constitution. It doesn't constitute what Thomas Jefferson would have called an establishment of religion. There is a historic tradition that the city rector attends council meetings because the town hall stands within the parish of St Michael at the North Gate. Most institutions in this country have a similar tradition. Parliament, for example, stands within the parish of St Margaret's, Westminster, and they and some other councils actually have prayers at the beginning of their sessions, attendance, of course, being optional. We do not have prayers, but have a non-denominational contribution from the city rector, reflecting the fact that this is a secular institution within a city which has a multiplicity of faiths. There is a constitution review underway, and of course members are welcome to contribute to that constitution review and any suggestions on this issue. I personally would be very cautious on the ground that we might risk achieving the opposite of what we intended by actually formalising the presence of a religious contribution within this council, which we do not have at present. However, it is up to members to discuss this, and not in the end up to me to dictate. I think that's enough from me. The question number 2, Councillor Malik to Councillor Brown. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. Then again, I don't think so. It answers my question. I heard Councillor Brown's statement, which mostly I agree, but obviously the story doesn't start from the 7th of October. It is a long history. But if we can, if we can fly the flag for Ukraine and Oxford United, I don't understand. And Lord Mayor is also, you are our civic officer. We have a training with Ramallah, where our previous Lord Mayor has visited and enjoyed their hospitality. And why cannot we, in the solidarity of Ramallah and West Bank people, we have not fly Palestinian flag on the town hall? I can understand politically Labour Party got loads of pressure from whichever way. Because when this again happened, I was told by one of very close in the Labour, when National Party said, do not pass any motion or anything on Gaza, you'll be kicked off from the party. It is a political matter, but we have a duty. We are a city of Oxford. We have a twinning city who's under the war. And we cannot, why cannot we show the solidarity? That's my question. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you. We have also been asked to fly the flag of Israel, and we have not flown the flag of Israel, and we have not flown the flag of Palestine. We have chosen, in this really difficult situation, to fly our city flag at half-mast, in reflection of the loss of life across the whole Middle Eastern area, in both Palestine and in Israel. And I think that that is the best solution that we can come up with as a city council.
Question number 3, Councillor Malik, you have a supplementary.
Thank you. Thanks for the answer. But I totally don't disagree with you, because I didn't want to interrupt when you were answering the question about Israel. I mean, this has happened later. I mean,
Councillor Mack, do you have a supplementary on question number 3?
No.
Devolution in Oxfordshire?
Yeah, no.
No. Good. We move on to question number 4. Councillor Raymond, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So we heard before that there was a feasibility study. So how long is that going to take? I think just to say something, that talking about a democratically elected country murdering people is different than showing support and solidarity to the people of the West Bank.
Thank you. I'm not sure that that was a supplementary on the flag bill, but Councillor Brown, do you have a response?
The supplementary was that the feasibility study has been going on for a long time. When it's going to finish?
Councillor Brown.
I'm afraid I don't have that information, but I can get you a written response.
Okay.
Question number 5, Councillor Raymond, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yeah. The question was, do you think it's, I might not have been clear, that there should be on all councillors an obligation that we have, like whenever we do receive a gift, although it's very rare, I agree, unlike Labour, they're falling over themselves trying to gather as much as they can, as soon as they can, that we should do it within 30-day time limit. That was, I suppose, my question.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, moving microphones because mine doesn't seem to switch off, which is a bit of a problem. We already have got an obligation, all of us, to declare any gift or hospitality that we are offered over the value of £50. So I hope all councillors are aware of that. I have actually, as a result of your question, asked officers to remind councillors of that, because it seems that councillors may not be aware of that, as witness your question. As far as I am aware, no councillor in the last 18 months has declared anything that falls into that remit. So perhaps if anyone feels they might have been offered, and by the way, it is an offer even if you don't accept it, that needs to be declared. So if anyone feels they have been offered something that would fall above that limit in their role as a councillor, then they do need to declare it. It will be shown on the council website if you do declare it, because every single councillor has underneath their name and their details, a bit which says about the register of interests. So everybody, if you have had anything you need to declare, do get in touch with Democratic Services. I'm sure they can point you in the right direction for the form, and then it will appear as appropriate on your record on the public website.
Thank you. From Councillor Miles to Councillor Turner, Gloucester Green Car Park. Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, thank you. So from the answer, I understand you haven't done any financial modelling of repurposing the asset of the car park. I understand that there are 105 spaces for public parking, which is separate from those that are leased to the flats that you mentioned. I'm assuming are separate. So bearing in mind, if we've got, you can fit 6 bikes on each piece of car parking space, which gives about 630 bike parking spaces in the car park. I'm wondering whether you would agree to do some financial modelling to repurpose this asset for alternative revenue generation purposes for bike parking in the city centre to align with some of the other council policies we have got on active capital.
Councillor Turner.
Yes, I understand where the council is coming from. And I mean, ultimately, it's a judgment for the council. And maybe just a few sort of points where I think it's going to be difficult to make this one fly. I mean, one is, I think, we don't control Worcester Street, so we don't know exactly how long that'll be there for. And of course, also, as the councillor mentions, there are other significant car parks which may fall out of use in the coming period, depending on how lease matters progress, and you know how much we might benefit. Car parking is still necessarily important in being provided in the city centre. So I think, a first question which I would probably ask would be about occupancy levels, to see if that would fly. I think I'd also want to understand the financial contribution, which of course would be related to it. In terms of asking officers to do so, I wouldn't be the person to do it, because I'm not, I'm a humble councillor. I'm not a skilled surveyor who would be able to undertake the work. In terms of asking officers to do it, I suppose I wouldn't mind asking to take a quick look if that was part of a budget amendment that other people wanted to propose. If they said, well, we'll take out the income stream and put something else in. But I think it would have to be really high level. To be completely honest, our property services and also people on car parks have really been working over time in sort of preparation of projects that might well come to fruition quite soon. I think, hopefully when we publish the budget papers, you'll see that in terms of mitigating some of the significant challenges we've got, that's an area where we're really focused. We've also, and the council has been part of the discussions, got to try and make sure that our various capital projects are kept on track. And one of the problems I think sometimes as members is that we keep saying, here's a project we'll look at, here's another project, and it's possible for potentially to be dissipated. So I suppose I wouldn't want to commit us to doing a very major piece of work on this, but it's a perfectly legitimate question to ask and try and get a sensible answer to you. I fear it might not quite fly. I hope that's okay.
Thank you. Councillor Southern, Councillor Raymond, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. Yeah, thank you for your response. I'm just a bit concerned that all of the sort of the responses about you're hoping that we can do something for somebody along the line at some point, anyway, effectively to go through larders. This is a winter fuel support for for pensioners, for the elderly. So how do you propose that they're going to be able to come to the community larders, how they're going to go to the household thing? Bearing in mind the stuff that you put in about community leaders, what are we doing as opposed to community leaders, what are the council doing? I am a bit wary that we have two prominent councillors that are now MPs and our own MP vote for this bill, so I'm just kind of looking at how this administration really looks at it, because not much in here is saying that we're going to help the people. It's October the 7th today, as we've been reminded. Winter is not coming, it's upon us. By the time what's on here goes through, there's a lot of hope, but nothing. So what can we do? What can we really do to mitigate people that are not going to stay cold or warm? It's a life and death matter, as there was a report in 2017 that stated there could be potentially thousands of people, so there could be tens, 20s, maybe hundreds of lots of people that really suffer and put pressure on the health service, and God forbid that they pass because of we cut £300 worth. The government, Labour government cut £300 worth of allowances that they've had after they've given all their life to this country. What can we do more substantially than hope that you put in there? Because most of that is to me edited. It's just hopefully something will happen, but nothing firm.
Councillor Turner.
Thank you. So, sort of slightly repeat the point as a humble councillor, ... You know, I don't set the budget for the government, and you know, it is what it is, and I'm not sure. I see an awful lot about hope in here. There are some substantive points which I'm happy going to run through. So there will be people in the city. There are people in the city who are entitled to pension credit who are not currently getting it, and we know about that, and that shouldn't be so. And so the point about community leaders is really, if there are other suggestions about it, you know, let's drop us a line, let's hear about them. It's about sending our officers there, because there may well be people who are pensioners, who could be entitled to pension credit, who aren't getting it. And once we've identified people in that position, we can help them apply. One of the things I've been pushing officers quite hard on as well is whether there's any kind of data matching stuff we can do. So, for example, if people are in receipt of a council tax relief, have been in receipt of it previously, or we can access the national scheme on council tax benefit. For pensioners, those records, you know, is there going to be some sort of read across? Can we see that maybe someone's missing out on something they could get? Because my hunch is that actually direct approach is going to work better than kind of the bus stop advertising type thing where you put a message out generally. So that's one. But really, so it's about the pension credit applications. The second bit was about the household support fund. The reason for not being totally definitive about that is because we haven't been given the money yet. But I understand that that is to be coming forward, and it's one of the things we should then look at about whether we can use that to assist some people, although clearly it won't make up all of the deficits people in Oxford. But I think, you know, for a lot of us, we're going to debate the issue this afternoon. The concern may not be with wealthy pensioners, it's about people that just miss out. So can we do something a bit more targeted there? The third thing is just about the Home Improvement Agency work. And I think that will be happening, that is happening, that's not a hope as well. And, you know, if members are interested in being briefed on that, I can see if I can get an email sent around or something like that. So, you know, we don't make the weather in terms of the decision on the overall policy, but we'll certainly try and help people in Oxford as best we can.
Thank you. Question 8 from Councillor Henwood to Councillor Railton. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you for the response. I fear, though, that it hasn't really answered my question. The council lives next to and adjacent to Stamford Road, Littlemore. Incoming traffic from the Rosehill roundabout is limited to 7.5 tonnes. The council should also acknowledge that Stamford Road Bridge is located on Stamford Road. Although that 100-year-old bridge may not have a weight limit, the councillor should be fully aware that Stamford Road does. Double-decker buses and ODS bin collections use this route to access Lismore, including Herschel Crescent. Will the portfolio holder agree that a laden or unladen ODS bin lorry weighing in excess of 15 or 18 tonnes exceeds the highway weight limits? Maybe the portfolio holder should pay closer attention to the signage on her own doorstep.
Councillor Railton.
I'm not really sure how that's relevant to the question AR1, which talks about Herschel Crescent. Doesn't mention Sandy Lane, doesn't mention Stamford Road. I think where I live is irrelevant, actually, thank you. I mean, you know, the 7.5 tonne weight limit on Oxford Road Lismore, you know, that does have a bus route on it. It does have bin lorry collections on it. Are you suggesting that we get rid of both of those? I mean, you know, clearly, yeah, I'm sorry. I mean, this is not a supplementary to the question I was asked, so I can't really answer it, sorry.
Perhaps I no. It seems, I think it may actually be a supplementary to question AR4, which mentions the railway line on Stamford Road, Littlemore.
I have a separate supplementary.
So the railway bridge on Stamford Road does not have a weight limit?
Thank you. Okay, question number 9 is also on the weight limit of bridges. Do you have a supplementary? Question number
AR2, Chair. Yes,
AR2.
I do have a supplementary. It does seem that bridges are your nemesis. The portfolio holder has a history of approving underspec bridges. If a bridge has a weight limit of 7.5 tonnes and a laden OS truck weighs more than 18 tonnes, could the portfolio holder explain how an ODS bin lorry and plant are compliant to this simple councillor? Does the portfolio holder actually know how heavy one of the ODS bin lorries are, laden or unladen?
I'm genuinely quite mystified. I'm not sure what bridges I've actually ever signed off. Given not the, so, I mean, yes, Donington Bridge, we're currently complying with the weight limit. I mean, again, I really do not understand what the supplementary question is here. Like, this does not fall under my portfolio. This is genuinely slightly ridiculous. Yes.
Question 10. Any supplementary?
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Is it possible to refer to the questions as they appear in the agenda? Because we don't get them numbered in the way that you're suggesting they come.
If that will assist members who are having difficulty in counting, I will be happy to do so. Question AR3. Any?
Point of order, Lord Mayor.
Can I please ask that we keep the conversation polite to each other on all sides of the house, because it seems like it's in the room, it seems like there's these comments about being ridiculous and if you can't number, etc. It's really unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you. If I consider any member as being disrespectful, I will of course say so.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. I wonder, in regards to that, whether you might like to retract your previous comment. I understand the Constitution asks for members to be polite to one another, and I don't think your previous comment was polite to me.
Thank you. I disagree, but let us proceed with the questions. AR3.
Yes, I do have a supplementary, Lord Mayor. The signage on the Sandy Lane Bridge, I refer to, linking Barnes Road and the Leaves, does state that there is a weight limit of 7.5 tonnes, which doesn't reflect in the portfolio holder's response. How would can we have clarification on the weight limit on the bridge, please? Would the portfolio kindly review her response and defer an answer to next session?
Councillor Elton.
Okay, so AR3 is actually a question about the Sandy Lane West Bridge, which does not exist. I was informed by officers that the bridge on Barnes Road, linking Blackleys Road, does not have a weight restriction. Yeah.
Question AR4, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. As I stated earlier, there is a weight limit on the Sanford Road of 7.5 tonnes. The Sanford Road Bridge is on Sanford Road, as we know it. There is an indirect weight limit, therefore, on the bridge. How will ODS serve the residents of Medhurst Way and Armstrong Road with a 15-tonne bin lorries and buses that are clearly not compliant?
Councillor Elton.
I think this is a question for the County Council, not for me. I don't think we should really be debating whether 7.5 tonne weight limits on roads commute to bridges, etc. ODS is in compliance with the weight limits in this city, and that's sort of it, really. I think any questions about how particular weight limits are enforced need to go to the County Council and the Highways Authority.
Thank you. Councillor Henwood, I note that most of the ensuing questions, AR5, 6, 7 and 8, are the responsibility of the County Council, but do you have supplementaries to any of them on anything that the City portfolio holder can respond?
Yes, I do. My questions are related to ODS vehicles and ODS plant, which is the responsibility of the City Council. We have a duty of care, Lord Mayor, to keep the public safe. We should know how much our vehicles weigh and where they can go safely. In response to AR5, I have no further supplementary questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see, do you have any supplementaries on AR 6, 7 or 8?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. The response from the County Council is that the Osney bridges, there's 2 of them, not the infamous Oxfence Bridge, which is, as we know, under spec, have a maximum load of 7.5 tonnes. With this knowledge, will this impact the delivery of the Labour Lib Dem bus gates planned for the city centre, given the potential weight crossing then?
That is the County Council's matter, thank you.
AR 7, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary.
AR 8, supplementary.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I do. I'm shocked to learn that no risk assessment has been carried out. ODS vehicles clearly do not comply with the weight restrictions, laden or unladen. As a matter of urgency with the portfolio holder, please reconsider developing a risk assessment of ODS plant and vehicles on weight restricted roads.
Councillor Elton. Councillor Elton.
We do know how much they weigh, and ODS complies with all the weight restrictions in bridges and highway structures in the city as responded. I mean, you don't need a risk assessment if you comply with all the weight restrictions on bridges and other highway structures in the city.
Question AR9 from Councillor Miles to Councillor Elton. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you, and thank you for your response around the work around climate change adaptation and flooding. I'm just wondering whether the council has convened already, or if not, is willing to convene a small round table with the small businesses that were affected by the flooding earlier on this year and who are, we anticipate, will be affected by flooding again in the forthcoming winter period, to really discuss lessons learned and anticipatory action that we can deal with as City Council.
Councillor Elton.
That is actually genuinely quite an interesting idea. I mean, certainly in January, it was quite apparent to me that we basically all forgot about the businesses on Abingdon Road, and I tried to make amends to that after the fact. A sort of citywide, a sort of targeted citywide city centre businesses. I think we do have the mechanisms of doing that. I will talk to the officer in charge of coordinating the job response. I think that's something that's a fairly good step.
Question AR10, Councillor Jafari Maldini. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. Is it possible for the council, for the cabinet member, to encourage more regular updates around this kind of issue about fencing going up, etc.? There is a lot of heightened emotions about the species that are there in Spindlebury Park. A lot of residents are really concerned, and what happens is when things arrive without any notice having been given, there's a lot of upset with that. Is it possible to make sure that that happens? And I know that within the planning regulations there is caveats around updating residents. Thank you.
Councillor Elton.
Okay, I think this is probably genuinely more a question for Louise. Is it possible to pass it over to Louise?
Yes.
Can I do that? All right. So there are legal restrictions around some updates. So obviously where that's not possible, it's just not possible. Okay. But for, I guess, for everything else, again, this may be more part of the development team's brief. Because it doesn't particularly fall under planning. I don't think I'm not aware that there are planning rules saying you must give particular updates to particular points. But I absolutely take your point that, of course, if people see something happening that they didn't know was going to happen, they can be very stressed and worried. So as far as possible, we should be updating. But I think we would like to collectively do our best to undertake two, where it is possible, and so there are some legal restrictions around certain things that we can't update on, then we will try to do better.
Thank you. Councillor, question AR11 on Gully. Councillor Jafari Maldini, do you have a supplementary?
Just a comment that I'm happy to toss on the residents' details, but generally a lot more thought needs to be given to those areas where the houses are very, very tightly fitted and there's no access to the charging points.
Thank you. Do you have any response, Councillor Rosen?
I think, you know, sort of access to off-street parking is generally a real Oxford problem. I think 46% of residents in Oxford do not have access to off-street parking, and that's very much why, you know, Gully was invented, and yet we very much hope to see a good few hundred of them appearing in the city next year.
Thank you. Question LA1 from Councillor Raymond. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Thank you for your response. Just a couple of things I want to know. I again want to put on record how well Thames Valley Police have supported your communities and how fast rapidly they responded. I'd also like to thank the officers actually from the City Council that collaborated with the police. However, I would say that not many councillors have been involved with the local community. I'll give you an example of the church of Legal Street. Nobody's contacted them. Nobody's contacted any of the four mosques that I have spoken to so far. So I am a little bit concerned about us, all of us. It's not just one side or the other. How elected representatives, what we're doing to support, help the community that we belong to. And I think that we've let our community down as a whole. And we need to do more because it isn't dangerous, it isn't scary for lots and lots of people, so I think we need to do more. So can I ask Cabinet Member if she's willing to work with cross-party to get something that's more substantive really, so that our communities do for yourself.
Councillor Aisha.
Yeah, I thank Councillor Rahman for those comments, and obviously I will take them forward, and I think it is a good idea if it hasn't been so already. I know that the Thames Valley Police have been with the community partnership, been working with all of the local communities of faith and none. But I know that we can always improve on our communication, and I will take that forward.
Thank you. Question NC1, Councillor Kerr. Do you have a supplementary? No. Question NC2, Councillor Rahman. Do you have a supplementary?
No.
Thank you. Question NC3, Councillor Henwood. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, no.
Question NC4, Councillor Henwood. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, and the following no supplementary.
Thank you, Councillor Henwood. Councillor Jafari Mabini, question NC6. Do you have a supplementary?
I do. So there is actually at the moment a 4-week waiting list, a 4-week wait time to seek someone advisor at the Agnes Smith. So my specific question was, has there been any extra financial support going up for advice centres? Because there is actually a lack of slots for people to be seen to then talk through all the options and what practical steps they need to take. That was really my specific question, which I don't think has been answered.
Councillor Chapman.
I'm not aware, Councillor, of any extra funds to support any particular advice centre. What I would say to those people who are obviously very concerned about this matter, and we'll be debating later on this evening, is that they can ring the contact centre and get some core advice there. And they can also turn up in person to the Westgate Library on 3 days a week, where there are slots available for general advice, including this area. So I would urge them to do their very best to do that, and we are doing everything we can, as Councillor Turner made very clear earlier in his answer to a very similar question, to reach out to people so they get the information they need about pension credit, cultural support fund and other things. And I think, to be fair to us, we are being more vigorous about this than many other councils are in the country. And that's partly because of the determination to do so. The leader has been very clear with me as portfolio holder that we need to do this. And therefore I'm making it absolutely clear to my own staff and teams that work in this area that we should do this in a very, very energetic way, particularly before Christmas, when the cut-off point will come for applying for pension credit. And just a final detail to add to what Councillor Turner said, I know that officers have reached out to hundreds of people in the city who they have data on actually, because as Councillor Turner said, they have the receipt of reduced council tax or other benefits and the support that the city gives. And those letters have gone out, I believe now, directly to them, to ask them to apply for pension credit. And then there'll be a wider campaign, which again council can allude to. So I think, while we don't like the weather, well, what council does early on, we can at least ensure that we can help, and we are.
Thank you. Question AH1, Councillor Henwood. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary on that.
Thank you, Councillor Henwood. Question AH2, do you have a supplementary? Thank you. Question AH3, Councillor Powell. Supplementary?
Not on this item, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Question AH4, supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Can I start by expressing my thanks to Councillor Hollingsworth for the clear and detailed answers to these questions. It is very, very much appreciated, and I know it helps give reassurance to residents who remain concerned about damage. So thank you very much for your responses. In the answer to AH4, it is noted that there will be spot checks undertaken during the event. Could you just expand a little bit on the content of those spot checks and specifically on sort of how they will be used to ensure that the plan is adhered to in the agreed way? I'm sure residents would feel reassured with that extra detail.
Yeah, as I'm sure you'll realise, what we can't promise is to have staff on the ground 24 hours a day during the set-up period, and so that's why I use that particular form of words. Obviously, what the staff who will be there will be focusing on the laying and positioning of the trackway is the crucial first step to make sure that entirely follows the plan that has been agreed with the roundtable with the applicant. And then to ensure that the vehicles servicing the site use that trackway. Clearly, the roundtable have a very strong incentive to ensure that the same thing happens, because it is they who pay for the damage to the park. So obviously it's in their interest to do it. So the key thing will be around that. Obviously the positioning of the funfair, which has a slightly separate access, as well the very limited amount of access which is required at the top of the park for the actual fireworks launching team. And things, and obviously the usual array of safety checks to ensure that the crowds can enter and leave in a secure, safe manner. And of course we will be checking, as is clear from all these answers, the condition of the ground in the run-up, and will, as with every single event, the council will reserve the right to cancel if it needs to.
Thank you. Question AH5, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Thank you for that response. In terms of point 5, I know already the note about officers being on site before and after the event. Could you just expand a little bit on sort of effectively how steps were taken if damage is noted in the lead up to the event? I know that last year many residents noticed the damage occurring prior to the beginning of the event. I do appreciate the trackways will deal with a significant amount about that. The improved vehicle management plan is really, really good to see. But I do wonder how we would respond if damage is seen to start occurring, sort of taking account the fact that once things have started being moved onto the site, things are effectively in motion. How would we respond in that eventuality?
Okay, I think I'm trying to think of the context in which such damage could be observed. If, for example, vehicles left the trackway and went onto the grass in breach of the condition, then both council officers and, I would expect, the event organisers to do this as well, because they have that responsibility to immediately prevent that happening again, reporting any damage that occurred and making preparations to put it right. The trackways are intended to prevent permanent serious damage to the ground. What they will do is yellow the grass inevitably, assuming that it ever stops raining and there's some sunlight. But if that does happen, that would be regarded as something which is manageable. So those are the kind of instances where I think we would be seeing damage and seeking to avoid it. Clearly, that is separate to seeing that the potential for damage has increased to such an extent that it isn't any longer appropriate for the event to go ahead. The Roundtable completely understand that potential exists. It's one, obviously, that none of us want to happen. We are literally
depending on your faith, the lap of the gods or the lap of the weather, whichever you prefer. You know, the decision could be taken quite late in the day, and the right to cancel is an absolute right and is clearly set out not just for this event but for every event.
Question 8.6, Councillor Clark, do you have a supplementary?
Not on this question, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Question
I
8.
declare an interest. I was one of those at the event in 2001. Just saying.
Thank you. Question 8.7. Any supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. And this has already been addressed in the portfolio holder's previous response to an extent, but it would be useful just to get some idea of a timeline for when the cancellation plan would be likely to roll into effect. I appreciate that is somewhat in the chosen metaphor here regarding weather, but I do think residents would really like to know some sense of time, and also thinking about the roundtable themselves, obviously, knowing when a decision will be taken would be very, very useful.
Yeah, the reason for publishing the additional protocol is to try and give some additional reassurance and certainty to the roundtable in particular, and indeed to any other event organiser who's looking at an event in a location where ground conditions as well as weather conditions are going to be at issue. I'm afraid, though, the answer is we just don't know. We just don't know. I mean, if you think back, I think to last summer, not in Oxford, but the cancellation of Boardmasters in Cornwall happened, you know, actually as the event was beginning, because adverse weather conditions came suddenly and were acute and were dangerous. So you just don't know. We, you know, these are outside our control. The only thing I can offer is going to be clearer earlier in advance if the ground conditions are unacceptable than if, say, there is an unforecast extremely high wind which would put people at risk. So I'm afraid I can't answer that question.
Question AH8, any supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. Essentially, thank you. Would it be possible to liaise with you and to agree a time to set up a chance to meet with concerned residents? Because there is still a lot of concern in my ward regarding this, and obviously we are all ultimately invested in trying to make sure there is the best possible outcome for the park, and I do think a lot of the sort of heat in this issue could well be dealt with by a meeting where residents get the chance to have their concerns listened to by yourself and by relevant officers.
Yeah, I'm sure we can arrange such a thing, and my experience is, to quote the late and great Maureen Christian, who very often might put herself in front of public meetings as a councillor, where people would shout at her, and eventually somebody would shout, "You're not listening," and she would go, "I am listening, I'm just not agreeing." So I hope we wouldn't ever get to that situation. But yes, obviously, I completely understand, and I think I put it in the answer and I just reiterate it. There are two opinions here which it is impossible to square. There are a significant number of people who don't want any events, least of all this one, to go ahead ever again. And there are also an awful lot of people across Oxford who would be desperately disappointed if we cancel the fireworks event forever. It is not going to be possible to meet both those needs. I've set out what I've tried to do in answers to you and to others as portfolio holder, which is to try and get an event which can go ahead and which doesn't damage the park. And I'm very happy to meet with people who say that, even if it will not necessarily make all of them happy.
Thank you. Question 8.9, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
No.
And question 8.10, supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Alex, for that. I know it's been hard to square those two that you've just mentioned, actually, but I would want to, I want to elaborate on that. I've been going to the fireworks display for over 50 years, and therefore it's not just belongs to St Clement's ward or the ward surrounding it. It belongs to the whole of Oxford. When we talk about cancelling something like this, we talk about cancelling something like St Giles Fair. Maybe not as long as that, but it's within the fabric of this city. So therefore, my question was really that I know we're trying to limit the damage to the park, and nobody can say there will be no damage, but everybody wants as least damage as possible. But we don't want to make it so draconian, that so difficult for the roundtable people that that it's not viable, it becomes so difficult because it's part of the fabric of our city. It's, without the round table, lots is not complete, and I think lots of people will agree with that.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, thank you very much. And given where Councillor Raymond grew up, I'm glad he went to it rather than just watched from his house in Green, which he made able to do, I think, certainly the fireworks anyway. I think it's the point that you've made in the preamble to the question is absolutely right. This is a long-running event which belongs to everyone. The park was granted to the people of Oxford, not just some people, it's all people. And so trying to strike the right balance, I think, here is really important. I think I would draw attention to what I've said in the written response, which is that last year's event and the damage that it caused was not just damaging for the park, upsetting for local residents and for broader residents, but because the round table had to pay to put that damage right, will have damaged the viability of the event far more than what we have agreed with them. And it's certainly not coercive, it's very much a collaborative approach that we've taken to take out the fire, which was the major factor that caused the damage, the preparations for the fire, and to think about ways in which other things can be done to reduce the damage. And that should make it a more viable event than last year's. I don't know what the total net take, as it were, for the round table from last year's event, but given the amount of money they have to pay to put the park right, I think this year's is likely, if it goes ahead, cross fingers and touch wood and, you know, weather gods and all the rest of it being willing, I think this year's will be more viable than last year's.
Thank you. Question CM1, I'm looking at our officers here. I should probably declare, for the sake of absolute probity, as I have been involved in negotiating the phasing plan referred to by Councillor Moncongo in his response, but purely as a third party brought in to help, not as a member of any community group, is I don't think there is any reason for me to absent myself. No, I'm seeing. But so do you have a supplementary, Councillor Smoten?
Yes, Lord Mayor, thank you. Relevant also to one of the forthcoming questions, and I imagine this will surely be a follow-up by email. Could you also set out how many groups have had their time slot displaced from the one that they were operating in prior to the takeover of the later contract?
Thank you, Councillor Smoten. I'm not aware of any group that has been displaced. If you know of any group, let me know. As the Lord Mayor said, and you were present as well when we were negotiating. Any group that is facing difficulties, they are welcome to contact me and we'll help them.
Thank you. CM2, Councillor Coyne, do you have a supplementary? Thank you very much. CM3, Councillor Marek, electric bikes, do you have a supplementary?
I do, Lord Mayor, thank you. Thanks for the response, but I'm very disappointed in your response, because when you stating 15.5 is just not a speed. I mean, City Council are in charge of the parks and they have the power to restrict what goes in and what not. My question raises because I have worked with the young families and the dog walkers, and Marsh Park is a very unique park when you have 3 different cycle parks going through. And I supported when Louis started the initiative to put the cycle lane through the parks, and I met on site and I supported the idea. But 15.5, if you are elderly, you are frail, enjoying the walk, or you with the small children, or you're walking your dog, and don't you think it is a dangerous, because it's a collision? I mean, nobody's questioning the modified batteries here because they're illegal anyway, it doesn't matter where they're right. But why, and the question, supplementary question is, what will happen if somebody gets seriously injured? Do we have in a danger of council being sued? Because that's our premises, where we have our right, we could have avoided that.
I suspect that may have to be referred for an email reply, but Councillor Moncongo, do you have anything to say?
Not really. already, but obviously we can discuss via the email.
Thank you. CM4, Councillor Jafari Mardini, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. It would be interesting to know what, if there has been any approaches to Serco Leisure about the terms and conditions of the particular lifeguards that have had any influence and how we're going to tackle the changes in terms and conditions such that this doesn't arise again. When I was part of your group, I spent quite a lot of time with Councillor Upton trying to, I know there was a big effort to try and recruit women lifeguards, and it is really, really disappointing to see all three of them who were recruited and trained through quite a long search have now left after not very long, and I just was wondering what it is about their terms and conditions that might be improved to prevent that happening again in the future.
Councillor Munganga.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we can be allowed to scrutinize the terms and conditions, but what I know for sure, the problem of lifeguards, including lifeguards, it's not isolated to Oxfordshire. It's all over the country. As you know, post-pandemic, the leisure sector hadn't recovered fully. We are struggling, as I can point out to the answer to my question there. If you know anyone who wants to train or any community groups, please do contact us. Thank you.
Thank you. Question LS1, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary? No. Question LS2, Councillor Rod Smith, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you for your response. I'm sure the councillors in the Chamber have been contacted by residents concerned about the poor appearance and the decline of homes, businesses left empty and getting into disrepair. Indeed, 19 old high streets and the Town Christmas Hub have been raised with both myself and Councillor Mongrovi. What I'd like to know, in fact, if I could, is that I can't find any of these notices that have been served on the council's website. And would you agree that it would be helpful to be transparent and have these listed for members of the public? Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
I would like to confirm that my understanding is that when we issue the fixed penalty notices, they are not a matter of public record. So that's why they're available online. It's only if we actually pursue a landlord to court and live there, then that becomes a matter of public record that we do publicise or make have success in that area. But when it's FPNs, we don't publicise that. And the difference as well is that when we issue a fixed penalty notice, that money stays with the council. So it is in our interest sometimes to do that, rather than pursue a case to court, where if they are fined, that money doesn't return to the council. So that's a consideration that we have to make.
Thank you. LS3, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to questions for the Cabinet Member for Planning. LU1, Councillor Malik, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thanks for the answer. Does the Environment Agency indicate any dates when they can complete the work?
No, so we've got senior officers at the council are meeting almost on a weekly basis with the Chief Executive Thames Water, with MHCLG, with DECRA, etc. So there is some, Thames Water have come up with some sort of interim thing that can come online in about 27, that they're waiting to see whether the Environment Agency are going to sign that off. So we'll watch this space, I guess.
Question LU2, my apologies for misprinting the agenda. I understand this is actually Councillor Jupp. Do you have a supplementary? Question LU3, Councillor Morris. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. It's another one about bridges and weight limits, but don't worry, it's a nice question. Which is, could you please let us know who the two councillors were who worked on this? so that I could thank them, because it's really welcome news for residents in Donington that a limited service will be able to cross Donington Bridge 46A later this month.
Councillor Acton.
To my knowledge, Councillor Charlie Hicks and Councillor Brad Bates did a lot of work on this. No doubt some others did too, and as I said, we were very pleased that the county acted quickly and have arranged this limited, but really good to see service.
LU4, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, but thank you very much for your answer, Councillor Upton.
LU5, Councillor Rawls, you have a supplementary? No. Good. LU6, Councillor Robinson, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Lord Mayor. Thank you. Thank you for engaging with the County Council Inclusive Transport and Movement Focus Group. I really appreciate your answer. I'm surprised to hear that you say that the e-scooter hire has been well managed and regulated. Will you ask the county how many penalties have been issued for bad parking or illegal riding during the pilot? As many of my residents would want to hear that.
Councillor Acton.
Yeah, I can try and get an answer to that. I'm not sure that there actually are penalties that the county council can levy. I think it's more that the voice scooters themselves they've got penalties within the app, etc., that can do it. So, yes, you could certainly ask Void how much.
Yes, and I think it's for Void to regulate, but from my resident point of view, they're not hearing about any regulation.
Yes, sorry, I'll chat to the county council to find out exactly what Void are doing. But I meant it's well regulated because there actually is legal structures around it, whereas for the e-bike schemes there are none.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Jafari Marbini, do you have a supplementary?
I do, but just to make it simple, for both questions, LU7 and 8, I was wondering if when talking about replacements, will it be replacement locally in the area of Blackbirdies and nearby, because that is what residents will be concerned about, that the pitch, that when you're talking about a replacement like for like, that it is done locally rather than at another site in the city. Thank you.
Councillor Acton.
Thank you. Obviously, in an ideal world, it will be absolutely as close as possible, so that's what our policies are, and it will be, we'll aim for it to be as close as possible. We are discussing probably over the Eastern Parish Council about a possible site there. Sorry.
There's a lot of unhappiness at Eastern Parish Council about that idea.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor Jafari Marbini, for combining your supplementary questions. LU9, Councillor Van Buckley Road.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that both councils wanted to get the information out quickly, but the Network Rail said there was information, plans they want to make and stuff they want to mitigate before they released the information. Could you tell us what that was?
Councillor.
What things have they put in place to mitigate the extra year's closure of Botley Road, which they recommend if you don't tell the public, because this is about trust. So we've already lost the trust of most of the residents in Oxford about transport policy. So therefore, when we don't tell them information that we have and we withhold it, we need to justify it. So if you could tell me what the mitigations they put in place, that would be really good.
Councillor Acton.
They didn't tell us anything at all at that point in terms of this is something we're looking to sort out. It was a general, we want to give you as best idea as possible about what the timescale will be before possible how they will live. But it was more about wanting to give us good information as possible when it did finally come out, not just say, oh, it's closed, but we've no idea when it's going to be reopened. The only thing I can think of that they mentioned, the one thing they mentioned at the time was that the shuttle that was put in place for disabled users to have a route into the city centre, the free shuttle bus that had been created, that would continue, and that they would try and develop that further. But there was no other information, mitigations that the signature.
Thank you. Question LU10, Councillor Rahman, electric hackney carriages, any supplementary?
Yes, Lord Mayor. I suggest that in your answer you said that we've discussed it here and I was here in March 24. That your answer to the question previously, you was informed in May that the bridge would go from here is a changing circumstance that's going to affect the taxi trade because the bridge is going to be closed, so they're going to have a further year of less income. So I suggest your answer to the previous question is your, should be taken into consideration for that.
Councillor Upton.
I take your point with that, so that's the extension of the closure of the Botley Road occurred after the licensing committee had taken this decision. So I guess it could go back to licensing committee to have a discussion again, but I have to say that we did discuss it in detail at the licensing committee. We heard from Councillor. We decided that it would extend it by an extra year, based on what we heard. And that already compromised between the desire to get air quality improved in the city as soon as possible and a recognition of the time that taxi credits have. So we did give an extra year. But let's bear in mind that a third of the taxis already have become electric. So they're really good progress is being made on that. And so they have had up until 2026. So I think it would be, I'm slightly looking over the chair of the licensing committees. I don't know whether it would be likely to come, we could bring it back to the committee to look at that again, but we have discussed it quite thoroughly. I don't know what the process is really again.
Thank you. It has been affecting the subject. I can't say anything more.
Thank you. And the last question, Councillor Mudgerman, on active cities. Do you have a supplementary? No. Good.
Point of order, Mayor. I realise we failed to welcome Councillor Robertson to her first council meeting. I think we should do.
My apologies. My apologies, Councillor, that was my omission, and welcome to Council. We will now take a break until 7 o'clock when we will hear our public speakers. Thank you. Thank you, please be seated. We've now come to agenda item 11, which is the public addresses. Just a short note on the public addresses. The 4th, 5th and 6th addresses are to have 2.5 minutes each. Normally, these 3 addresses on the same topic would have 5 minutes in total, and that remains the general rule. But in this instance, I'm using my discretion to extend the time on the ground that I believe the speakers have exceptionally valuable local experience of long standing, and that it's important they are heard by members in order to inform our deliberations. Having said that, I would like to call the first public speaker, which is Mr. Greg Owen. Mr. Owen, thank you for coming to address us. You have up to 5 minutes.
Okay. I'm a resident of Greater Leeds and a member of a new group of volunteers, the Friends of Spindleby Nature Reserve. My question is to the Cabinet Member for Planning. It concerns the Knights Road site allocated as residential in the Local Plan 2036. It's part of the Blackbird Leeds redevelopment project on which the Council is partnered with Peabody. The site is under construction and includes part of the Spindleby Nature Park. I don't know why the Council designated part of our nature reserve for residential use, and I don't know why they have given sole responsibility for it in perpetuity to Peabody, especially as the Council still own it. I do know residents have concerns about it. In my case, informed by my familiarity with the Planning Permission and the associated documents and conditions. Condition 9 and its approved Construction Environmental Management Plan dictates that 2 biodiversity exclusion zones were to be established inclusive of this part of the nature reserve. On page 6, paragraph 2.2.2, bullet point 2, it denies contractors access to these fenced-off areas during the construction phase unless associated with the new planting. In the summer, I had fears that changes would happen in this area and the public would not be informed. So I sought assurance from the planning officer, the council's regeneration manager, and Peabody's development manager that only work by dint of the planning permission and conditions would occur. I got it via emails. But things are different enough now within the exclusion zone to raise reasonable concerns. I have the following examples. The reptile and sediment fencing to protect the slow worms, the exclusion zones and the brook, which the CEMP dictated to be in place prior to commencement, has never been installed. Fencing for these zones has occurred out of sequence. New fences have recently appeared that were scheduled for erection prior to commencement. Huge tree boughs that in the Spindlebury zone have been cut down and the logs stacked by the contractor, not for ecological reasons or safety, but to make way for the new fence. They must have entered the zone. An earthwork has been constructed within this exclusion zone. I know what it's for, but its presence contradicts the access restrictions. Will the member for planning give a detailed explanation of how the continuing works and access to the biodiversity exclusion zones conforms to the planning permission and conditions which can only be varied by written consent?
Thank you, Mr. Owen. Does the Cabinet member have a response?
Thank you, I do. Hello, Mr. Owens. First of all, congratulations on the formation of the new Friends group. That's great news. Really pleased to hear that. So, as you mentioned, the Blackbird Leys redevelopment project is going to provide 294 new affordable homes, shops, green spaces, and a new community centre for Blackbird Leys. And the site does include part of the Spindlebury Nature Park. It is a really difficult balance when we've got over 3,000 householders on our waiting list for social housing, and homes are too expensive for most people to buy or rent in this city. But at the same time, we really do recognise the importance of green space for mental and physical well-being, and this is reflected in the Council's Green Spaces strategy. Now, this site in particular, planning permission was given for the development, and from that point on, it becomes the applicant's responsibility to ensure that the development is brought forward according to the submitted plans and all the conditions. If a concern is raised with us, a member of the enforcement team will visit the site to ensure work is being conducted appropriately. And this has actually been the case on this site when issues have been raised previously, and our enforcement officers have already visited. But thank you for bringing these additional concerns, and I will ensure that our officers will now investigate the matters that you have raised today, including the earthworks and the access to the biodiversity exclusion zones, and I'll get them to respond to you directly with the details on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Second public speaker is Mr. Chaka Artwell. Mr. Artwell, you have up to 5 minutes.
Will Oxford City's elected councillors and ODS stop the direct and indirect discrimination against the 5,000 homes who do not enjoy internet access, do not have a smartphone, and have never needed to use a QR code? Oxford City Council's discrimination against cash users and against people without access to the internet is an unlawful form of direct and indirect discrimination. For this Labour-led council, which celebrates its politically correct diversity, inclusion, and equality creed, why are the paid councillors so tolerant of discrimination against cash users and people without access to the internet? As you are aware, the Governor of the Bank of England reports 5 million subjects of His Majesty do not have current accounts and use cash for transaction, which equates to 5,000 Oxford homes. It is completely illegal and ethically wrong for elected councillors to tolerate this level of discrimination. The discrimination takes the form of people being unable to contact their elected councillors, who, in the case of Barton, do not live on the estate, do not have surgeries. As I have stood as a candidate in local elections, Barton people ask me for assistance for issues which ought to be addressed by the paid councillor. How many of these people many of these people have senior years without access to the internet, and they are effectively disenfranchised. The whole ethos of local government councillors is destroyed by elected councillors hiding behind the internet as only means of communication, communication which often does not receive a reply. Smart parking meters discriminate. ODS has removed its reception at Cowley Marsh and Horse Path Repair Centre. Post office PayPoint cash users suffer discrimination as transactions are not instant and summonses have been issued as a result. How many council tax summonses have been issued by the council to people using the slower cash PayPoint system? Councillors being local, available and accessible are the traditions of this Protestant Catholic nation. Will Oxford City Council require its publicly paid councillors to reveal their postal address for people without access to the internet, as hiding behind the town hall for communications does not work? Will Oxford City Council investigate how many council tax summonses have been issued to PayPoint users? Will Oxford City Council instruct ODS to reopen its reception at Cowley Marsh and Horse Path? Will Oxford City Council please mandate its paid councillors to make publicly known when their surgeries are held? This is especially important when councillors do not live in their elected areas. Will the council require councillors to reveal how many inquiries they receive from the public and how many they've meaningfully responded to, as it is courteous of paid councillors? Will Oxford City Council require its elected councillors to reply to all who contact them, as one would expect of publicly paid councillors? The briefing notes for this full council, despite my friend in the public gallery, whose representatives for the elder people, asked many times for it to be...
Mr. Artwell, could I ask you to stick to the address that is on?
Just make sure the briefing notes are available. Lastly, will Oxford City Council examine its policies to prevent policies from discriminating against cash users?
Thank you for your address. I believe Councillor Chapman has a response.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Artwell, for your address. I have to say that I do not recognise the situation characterised in it, and I certainly don't agree that our service offer is discriminatory. The City Council, through its citizen experience strategy, seeks to ensure that no one in this city gets left behind in their interactions with us. We provide a range of ways to contact us to get support. You can see us in person, talk to us over the phone, and interact with us online. You can pay your bills in person, online, and over the phone. We continue to provide face-to-face and other assisted support and help the most vulnerable people to ensure their complex needs are met. We see about 450 people each month face-to-face. Services are offered in the Westgate Library Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and officers are attending food larder sessions around the city to support residents with their queries. Housing surgeries are held at the Westgate Library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We will do all we can to reduce digital exclusion by improving citizens' skills and access to technology. We have a digital cafe available in the library every month to help citizens with the use of that technology. Our contact centre is open Monday to Friday, supporting a range of services from council tax, rents, benefits, planning, waste collection, housing repairs. Each year we handle around 180,000 calls as our trained customer service officers offer support and guidance, not just to our own services, but signposting callers to partner organisations as well. We also offer a web chat facility to help people engage with our digital channels. Customer satisfaction with our contact centre runs at 83%, and face-to-face is 97%. There is a whole network of council officers that provide outreach, tenancy officers, community health development officers, to name but a few. And we provide grant funding to enable local advice centres to thrive across the city, which means there is, independent of the council, face-to-face support available in our communities. With regard to payment methods, from the 630,000 odd households in the Oxford City catchment area, approximately 2,300 council taxpayers choose to pay using All Pay at the post office or at a local shop. Most customers who choose this option pay their council tax instalments on time, but a small number do not. Since the 1st of April 2024, persons using this payment method make up less than 1% of those summoned for missing or overdue payments. Direct debit is favoured by a significant number of households. As long as the instruction has been set up, the customer does not need to worry about the logistics of paying each month. And Oxford City Council offers a choice as to when to pay, so citizens know what date the payment will be taken from their account, fitting it in around the timing of their salary or wage coming into it. Online payments save time. People do not have to wait in lines, take time to write checks, or wait for paper bills. Online payments where people can do it also decrease the chance of overdue payments. In summary, we provide a real variety of ways for all the people in our city to interact with us. I believe we have a strong offer that recognises the diverse needs of individuals. We have diverse services to match those needs. I take pride that we still offer extensive face-to-face services and are out there proactively in communities, whilst being one of the most advanced councils in England when it comes to exploiting the digital revolution. And our citizens regularly rate us highly for doing this well, putting us in the top 10 for councils surveyed every month. A very different story from the one painted in the address we have just heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Our third public speaker is Georgie Steele, who is speaking on motion 13F. Ms. Steele, you have up to 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. You'll forgive me if I stumble over my own handwriting because my printer's broken. Sorry about that. Oh, thank you. I've shortened it, though. You'll be glad to hear. So I'm a carer and a theatre maker. I live with my family close to Oxford. I have 2 sons who are now 19 and 17. They have a degenerative muscle wasting condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy, which you might have heard of. And they're wheelchair users with limited use of their hands. They need to be hoisted, for example, to go from their wheelchairs into a bed. For the last 13 years, we've been funded through direct payments to pay for carers. The problem has been finding the carers. It's been a time-consuming and demoralising struggle because most British people don't want to work as carers. When we did find a carer, they would often let us down with a few heroic exceptions. So we started to employ various agencies to supply carers who were generally migrants. The carers who came were competent and thoughtful and lovely people, but they were often exhausted, they were often late, they often needed to take time off due to illness, which meant replacement carers had to be sent at the last minute. This was, as you can imagine, really difficult for us as a family because, for example, when our son was in the middle of his A-level exams, if a carer was late, he then couldn't get to school on time. It meant that we were late for work. It was also distressing for our sons to need to explain their complicated care routines to a new, exhausted person almost every day. But this was really nothing in comparison to how distressing it was to discover why the carers were late, why they were absent. They didn't want to explain why this was, but we gradually understood they were being systematically exploited by their sponsoring agencies. One carer told us that some days he was said, you've got to arrive at 6 a.m. at this place in the middle of nowhere where he was to do some work as a carer, but there was no bus to get there, but the agency told him, you've just got to get there anyway. So he would end up using his wages to pay for a taxi because he was so dedicated that he was determined to get there and do the job. Carers were often placed in poor housing, and most of their earnings were taken by the agency to pay for this accommodation. We really wanted to challenge the agency about this, of course, but the carers said, please don't say anything because they were terrified of losing their sponsorship. They'd been told repeatedly, don't complain or we'll send you home. And they knew that if their sponsoring agency was going to be investigated and shut down, they then have to find another sponsor. Trying to find another sponsor is an absurdly brief race against time, just 60 days. One of our carers found another sponsor, but then their existing agency refused to sign the papers releasing them. And if carers can't find a sponsor, they have to return home, and then they face an enormous debt that they've got to repay, because often they would borrow the money to come here. Some agencies charge more than £10,000 as a recruitment fee. Often this goes near to breaking people. We had one carer who collapsed in the street in Oxford. He was taken to hospital only to be told the next day that he had to go back to work and he couldn't have any sick pay. So we have a badly treated, essential workforce constantly on the verge of collapse, not able to provide reliable care for the most vulnerable people in our society. Not to deal with this is not only cruel, it's also incredibly short-sighted and unwise. So please, please can we improve visa conditions so migrant carers know that they can find a better sponsor more easily if their current one exploits them. It's a great privilege for me that migrant carers are prepared to leave their homes, their children, and their own country to come far away to my home and help look after my children. It's a great shame on us all that they have to do so under such conditions. Thank you.
Thank you for your address, which I'm sure you've seen has met with the sympathy of the whole of Council. And thank you also for your support and solidarity for those who provide care for some of our most vulnerable citizens. Susan, I believe you have a response.
I do, and firstly, thank you so much for sharing what was a really personal account, but an incredibly moving and concerning account for all of us. It's really important that you've raised these concerning issues in your address, and as we've all seen from recent news reports, this is playing out at a national level as well. We know that workers are coming to the UK to seek a better life, but some are being exploited, exactly as you've described. Many migrant care workers are unaware of the sponsorship process or their employment rights in the UK and are being forced to work long hours for poor pay under the threat of sponsorship removal. As a City Council, we've been working closely with the police, Oxfordshire County Council, the NHS and other partners to prevent and respond to this issue at a local level. We understand that some migrant care workers face labour and financial exploitation, a fear of their employers, exactly as you have described, and the threat of losing their sponsorship. Also, poor and overcrowded accommodation and not being able to provide for the families they've left behind. All of those things obviously significantly impact them physically and mentally. Partners have been raising awareness among care workers who are on sponsored visas and speaking with them, trying to address and alleviate the fears they have, informing them that they have options and giving them practical and emotional support. We also undertake activities that disrupt those who exploit care workers. We are also working with government departments and represent Oxfordshire partners on national forums who are driving for change to the sponsorship scheme. We feel strongly that the scheme should never put a care worker in an exploitative situation where they feel that it's a better option than leaving and falling into destitution and homelessness. We are committed to support those affected, so please do encourage anyone that you are concerned about or who knows of someone being exploited to contact our anti-slavery coordinator confidentially, and I'm very happy to supply you with her email and telephone number. Thank you very much indeed for raising these concerns today. Thank you.
Thank you. Our fourth address, I'm told Sushila Dal is unable to attend, so a representative will be addressing us on her behalf. Mr. Waller.
Thank you. This is written by Sushila Dal.
Refugee Resource stands in firm opposition to the reopening of Campsfield Detention Centre. We see the damage done to vulnerable people when they're in prison for indefinite periods, having committed no crime and having come to the UK seeking safety and sanctuary. Immigration removal centres such as Campsfield are well-documented sites of violence, hostility and degradation, with no place in a modern society that claims to respect human rights. Detention centres have long been sources of unnecessary harm, fear and trauma. As a trauma-informed therapeutic organisation, Refugee Resource has had to work with those affected by detention to help them heal after damaging impacts of indefinite imprisonment and the threat of deportation to places where their human rights have been seriously breached, and from where they have fled, losing everything. Reopening Campsfield would represent a significant step backwards for the UK's asylum system. Instead of expanding detention centres such as Campsfield, the government should focus on providing humane solutions that respect the dignity and rights of all individuals, safe routes to the UK, a fair and open asylum system without long waits, caring caseworker interactions with phone access that doesn't cause massive delays. In addition, negative portrayals of asylum seekers and policies that stigmatise and demonise asylum seekers only serve to deepen societal divisions and fuel the far right. It's critical that we reject these harmful narratives and work towards a more inclusive and compassionate approach to migration. Oxford City Council, being a council of sanctuary, continues to demonstrate a commitment to human rights and dignity. Strongly stating its opposition to imprisoning people at Campsfield is part of upholding these values, which align with ours. In solidarity with the Council, Refugee Resource reiterates its strong opposition to the reopening of Campsfield and adds its voice to your call on the government to abandon its plans to reopen Campsfield, take immediate steps to reduce the use of detention in the asylum process, introduce more humane migration policies, starting with safe and legal routes to the UK for asylum seekers, and to prioritise the protection of human rights over policies that perpetuate fear, harm and division. Thank you.
Our next address is from Emma Jones, representing Asylum Welcome. Emma.
Yarlswood, Brook House, Harmondsworth. These names are notorious for a reason. Immigration detention centres are synonymous with cruelty. At Asylum Welcome, we stand with all those impacted by the hostile environment, including the detention system. Our opposition to reopening Campsfield is evidence-based and shaped by our experience providing a visiting service there from 1993 to 2018. Despite government claims, most detainees held at Campsfield will eventually be released into the community. Many will endure long periods of detention, even without a realistic prospect of deportation. Charlie Taylor, the Chief Inspector of Prisons, revealed in a damning report earlier this year that around 60% of detainees at Harmondsworth near Heathrow were eventually released, and we have no reason to believe that the new Campsfield will be any different. Immigration detainees are not being held in punishment for a criminal offence, and yet the system places overwhelming emphasis on confinement and security, with little focus on welfare. Detention centres are operated for profit by private companies, complaints of bullying and racism are rife, and healthcare services are often drastically under-resourced. We know that survivors of torture, trafficking and sexual abuse are routinely detained, contrary to official guidelines. Again, we have no reason to believe that Campsfield will be any different. Additionally, legal representation becomes far more difficult within detention, leaving detainees even more isolated from justice. And unlike in any other European country, the UK has no time limit on detention, meaning people can be held indefinitely, sometimes for months or even years, without knowing when they might be released. This is a shocking abuse of human rights, and as I'm sure you will agree, is contrary to everything we like to think about ourselves as a country. Unsurprisingly, all this leads to a cycle of trauma, self-harm, and tragically, suicide attempts. From January to May this year, there were 285 incidents of self-harm across the UK's detention estate, meaning self-harm incidents occurred almost twice a day. At Asylum Welcome, we believe in a compassionate, fairer approach. We welcome the closure of Campsfield following the 2 Shaw reviews, after which the then Conservative government appeared to accept that immigration detention must be drastically reduced. The Brooke House inquiry published last year exposed a toxic culture and credible evidence of breaches of human rights law and recommended widespread changes, including a 28-day time limit on detention. We support community-based alternatives to detention that have been successfully piloted in recent years. We urge you all to back the motion and to continue to raise Oxford's voice to keep Campsfield closed. Thank you.
Our final address is from Bill McKeith, speaking on behalf of Campaign to Keep Campsfield Closed. Bill.
Good evening. When Campsfield closed some 6 years ago, it was part of a national reform of immigration detention. This was the fruit of a movement that built from protests of detainees deep into civil society to the official reports of Stephen Shaw, recognising a cruel and failed system. Cruel to the families divided by Campsfield, cruel to drive Ramazan Kumluka and Janos Dragutan to take their own lives in Campsfield. Cruel because nowhere else in the UK are people imprisoned without time limit and without the agreement of a court of justice. Failed because most people detained, up to 80% by some accounts, end up back living with the rest of us. People like my friend Jean-Marie Assandé, who arrived from Côte d'Ivoire in 1995 from his university overrun by the army, spent 6 months in Campsfield and now has family and lives in Oxfordshire, his home. The Rwanda flights plan, the reason for reopening and doubling the size of Campsfield in Kidlington and Haslar in Portsmouth, was defeated. But instead of ditching the reopenings, the new government announced it would use the space to deport more people anyway. More detention was not in the Labour Party manifesto and is wrong. More detention space is not needed if only those likely to be removed are detained. The detention centres are not full anyway. Derwentside Women's Detention Centre in Durham has never been even half full. There is doubt that other governments will agree to receive deportees. But more important, what is needed is more safe ways of reaching the UK to claim asylum, not to demonise migrants and Muslims, including those from Bangladesh. This is a digest of my public. I sent in twice this length. I was asked to cut the length, and this is the digest of it.
I understand. Thank you. Please continue.
Thank you. More important, what is needed is more safe ways of reaching the UK to claim asylum, not to demonise migrants and Muslims, including those from Bangladesh mentioned by the Prime Minister, not to take lessons from a neo-fascist government leader in Italy. Let the government at least return to the reform programme, detain fewer people for shorter periods, and pursue community-based alternatives to detention as urged by the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. The City Council could and should offer to facilitate such a pilot scheme in Oxford. The very broad-based and representative coalition to keep Campsfield closed commends the motion before you.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand I understand that differed from the published address, and I am told that that is because we asked speakers to keep to a shorter time than they thought they originally had. Susan, do you have a response?
I do. As you will be aware, we have got a motion on our council agenda later on to discuss this very issue. But I wanted to reassure you and indeed council that we haven't waited for that motion to come to council before restating this council's very long-standing policy to keep Campsfield closed and to protest its opening. So on the 22nd of August, the day after the announcement was made, I wrote to the Home Secretary. I have today circulated that letter to all council, and indeed the response from the Home Office, which you'll perhaps be unsurprised to hear was a little disappointing. And funnily enough, they didn't agree with our position on this. But, you know, to make the serious point here, we do support, well, first of all, we're grateful to all of the organisations that you represent for all the long-standing work that you do supporting asylum seekers in our city, and specifically at Campsfield. I'm really sorry that you are probably going to have to be doing that again. That is not the wishes of this council. As I said, we have had a long-standing campaign that supports yours. I specifically wrote and asked the Home Secretary to cancel the reopening of Campsfield House as a detention centre, to create safe havens and more legal routes to apply for asylum in the UK, to prioritise the prompt and fair processing of asylum claims, whilst introducing appropriate safeguards to allow asylum seekers to live and work in our communities in the meantime, and also to adequately fund local authorities to be able to support people seeking sanctuary locally. I'm very happy to make those two letters available to you so that you are fully appraised of both our letter to the Home Office and also their response. But thank you again for coming to address us today.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time to address us today. We now move on to item 12, which is the Scrutiny Committee Update Report. Councillor Miles.
Thank you. And I first of all like to say thank you to Alice Courtney for her service as Scrutiny Officer. I think you may be aware she's now moved on to another role in a different district council within Oxfordshire. We heartily welcome Celeste, who is with us here today, who has taken on the new duties as Scrutiny and Governance Advisor. So welcome, Celeste, for taking on that role. So this report provides an update on the activity from the 1st of July to the 30th of September. Just to be brief, during this period, the committee met twice, and we had various panels. Housing and Homelessness panel met once. There was Finance and Performance panel that met 3 times, and the Climate and Environmental panel met once. Since the last council meeting, 12 recommendations came from Scrutiny and were recommended to Cabinet. Half of these were accepted and 1 was agreed in part. If we turn specifically to the panels, you can find the details in your pack in the report, but just to provide a brief overview, for the Housing and Homelessness panel that reviewed 2 Cabinet reports and there were no recommendations. Climate and Environment had 6 recommendations agreed, and the Finance and Performance panel were involved very specifically in scrutinising the end-of-year performance report and executive pay policy for ODS. And just to remind you that panel is in its new form following amendment to the panel's brief earlier this year. So the company scrutiny panel took on this new form. And finally, the budget review group and its scope was agreed by the committee in September for December to January, and so we'll hear more from them at a later date. Just like to say thank you to Cabinet members and officers who've engaged in the activity during this period, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. We are invited to comment on and note the report. Are there any comments? Seeing none, can we agree to note the report? All those in favour? I think that's everybody. Good, thank you very much. We move to item 13, which is motions on notice. We have a time limit of 13 minutes. The first... 60 minutes. Sorry. 1 hour. However many minutes make up an hour, I can't count. Don't. But I'm sure there are plenty of people in this room who will remind me. For motion A, winter fuel payments, and I believe it is Councillor Smoten to propose.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
First of all, just a bit of admin at the top. I hope people are clear what's gone on with the amendments. Basically, I have amended my own motion so as to integrate some of the paragraphs from the proposed amendments, but not the crucial changes, so there will still be amendment debates. The bits that I've accepted are a couple of copy edits from the IOA's amendment, just sort of two-word amendments about uptake, and the words "by change to" had somehow got in there. Honestly, not sure what happened there, but thank you for correcting that. I've also accepted the Labour amendments paragraph that says Council further believes that the threshold for the receipt of any benefit should be staggered rather than immediate, which I think is a good point. I've accepted a variant on the numbers relating to the energy price cap, and I've accepted their paragraph that says Council notes the good work already done by City Council officers to promote the uptake of pension credit, which I also heartily agree with. The other parts of the amendments we'll come to debate in due time. And now the proposal proper. So I'll kick off with a quote from Hansard, which says that it would be wrong to wait until we have the results of our pensions review to take action to help elderly people with winter fuel bills. Although the poorest do receive some help through cold weather payments, they only go to those on income support. The payments are no help at all to most pensioners, including the 1 million not receiving income support entitlements and those on the margins of poverty. And they are of doubtful help even to those who do qualify, who often don't know whether they can afford to spend extra money on fuel or not when it is cold. That, of course, is Gordon Brown. He's speaking on November 25th, 1997, in that year's pre-budget statement. He speaks in the wake of the 96-97 winter, when there were in excess 49,000 deaths, it is estimated. And he makes the case for a winter fuel payment, and you can see him also with the comments about income support, making the case for universality. However, the present Chancellor is also correct to note that many pensioners receive the payment who have no need of it. It's common to see it donated. And that's money that the country could put to better use in a more targeted fashion. The question is, what do we do about it? Make no mistake, whatever we do as a country, it won't be perfect. The system will make mistakes of execution and of design. The question is, what kind of mistakes are we willing to tolerate when it comes to heating for the most vulnerable in our society? If we go down the government's preferred path, the benefit will be withdrawn from anybody not registered for a qualifying benefit. That will mistakenly take money from everybody who would be eligible, but is not registered. And who is it that's the most likely to make a mistake when it comes to navigating a bureaucracy? That would be the least well-educated. It'll be those on the verge of dementia. It'll be those who don't have a support network. And perhaps even it might be some people who ought to claim, but would be ashamed of doing so. Now, as a motion, we could just leave matters there. We could just identify the problem and we could shrug as regards a solution. But I think that that would be unprincipled. This motion therefore proposes, specifically, that rather than cut the payment, instead we raise a tax on the most well-off. That would recover the exact same funds that the Chancellor is looking for, but it takes a little more from the top of the income scale in order to ensure that every last person at the bottom is spared the impact, rather than just those with the resources to apply. This system can't be perfect either, but it makes the opposite kind of errors. Some people will evade tax illegally. Some people will avoid it through trickery. I would suggest that a few enterprising tax dodgers are a problem we'd rather have than thousands losing their fuel payments without ever realizing why they have lost them. And I note, by the way, that this is exactly the same argument as relates to basic income that is unfettered by bureaucracy, which is Lib Dem and Green Party policy at least. So, if the solution is so simple, why isn't our government doing it? I would have to speculate that the answer would be fear. Fear specifically that saying the word tax will give the Tories a rallying cry in a way that the word cut does not. Reassurance in that respect is, I think, the most valuable thing that this council can do today. To say to our government, give generously and balance the books by taxing carefully. Better a tax than a cut. Councillors, please support the motion.
Thank you. And I understand the parts of the two amendments that have been agreed by Councillor Smoten will be circulated. They're now incorporated into the main motions. The proposer has the right to do that without debate. Seconder of the motion is Councillor Fairweather. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right.
Thank you. In which case, we proceed, I believe, to the First Amendment, or rather those parts of the First Amendment that are not already incorporated. Is everybody happy with what is and is not now in the main motion, or shall we wait for... I think I shall wait for the paper to be handed round. Everybody should have 3 pieces of paper. Is there anyone who does not have 3 pieces of paper in front of them?
Some people haven't had all of them down there.
Ah, I can see some hands up. Can we hand out? Thanks. Yes. Okay. Good. Do all members now have 3 pieces of paper? You can see people still walking around. Good. Okay, we now proceed to the amendment in the name of Councillor Henwood. Councillor Henwood, would you like to speak?
Well, thank you very much for bringing this motion forward.
The reason I've put an amendment in is simply because I felt, and I might be wrong, so correct me if I am, that if you are a homeowner and not, you could be in a position where you're asset rich and cash poor, I think is where I'm going. So it's the definition of wealth that I'm struggling with in the amendment. I like a definition of what is meant by wealth, whether it's capital wealth or cash wealth. And I think that's where I'm struggling with, is that definition of wealth. Where does it come from? Other than that, I think it's a good motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Second is Councillor Yateman. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right, please.
Thank you. We now enter into debate on the amendment. Does anybody have any points to make in debate? I'm seeing none. This is on the amendment in the name of Councillor Henwood, those parts that have not been accepted by the mover of the main motion. Are there any points to be made in debate? Councillor Mundy.
Well, only that, taking on Councillor Henwood's point, sorry. I actually do favour that part of the motion because I do think it's important to be speaking about wealth taxes rather than trying to go after people for benefits. And so I would favour the original motion as it's read, and so I would be voting against this amendment, as I would the Labour amendment as well on the same basis.
Any further points in debate? Councillor Rahman.
Yeah, I'll oppose the amendment, as I would oppose the motion, on the basis that pensioners that get this winter fuel allowance, they've generally served the country all their life. They're in their latter stages, and the stress that it causes for the few that can afford it, that take it, there must be better ways of dealing with the a 1.4 billion deficit in our economy, in £1 trillion economy. So that's why I would oppose it.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any further points in debate on the amendment? Councillor Hollingsworth.
I'm just trying to think through the process here, and if this is passed, then obviously the bit of the Labour amendment is covered by this as well, so we wouldn't be speaking on it. So just taking, I suppose, a third point of view to those already expressed, the motion as written recovers the cost. I'm sure Treasury officials like cost neutrality. Fortunately, we as a council don't have to worry about cost neutrality at the Treasury. I think my objection to this element of the proposal is it essentially means the cost falls on pensioners and on no one else. I'm a big believer in funds coming from general taxation paid by everyone, irrespective of their age. So rather than differentiate by age, I think we should be differentiating by income and indeed by wealth. And as Councillor Mundy said, I think wealth tax is long overdue. But it's the age element of it which I object to, and why I will be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Are there any further points in debate? I am seeing none. Councillor Yateman, you reserved your right. Do you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
No, in which case we move to a vote on...
Lord Mayor, do I get a right to reply at that point?
Yes, of course you do. I apologise.
Thank you. Just to address a few of the points made. So Councillor Henwood asks what one would consider wealth. I don't propose to express a particularly strong view on the subject. I would lean personally in the direction that if one has a great deal of wealth, but that is exclusively locked up in real estate, that one would nonetheless count as having that amount of wealth or some proportionate figure. I appreciate it's not an easy line to draw, but I think generally speaking, if you do have a very large asset, then one would count as having wealth. Councillor Hollingsworth raises the point about who you're collecting the tax from. The only reason to circumscribe it would be the fact that it is also the selective group of people that are being given the universal income in this particular instance. If that weren't the case, then there would, of course, be cause to move that out with them, or generally just to generalise the matter a little bit more, and I'm not averse to doing so in general principle. One other thing that confuses me slightly is that Councillor Henwood, you're saying that you just have a qualm about the definition of wealth. I'm surprised you didn't just strike that out, that it could have just said those who receive the highest incomes. And similarly, Councillor Hollingsworth could simply have struck out specifics there to say just recover it through the tax system, period, rather than recover it through a tax which is particularly circumscribed. So it seems to me that the striking that's going on here is rather too broad for the objections that are actually being expressed. As a slightly more general point, I would exhort us to keep this paragraph because it proposes a solution, and because otherwise what we have is basically just a letter of complaint, and that's very easy to do, but I think it is always better to try to do constructive opposition here, and that means trying to bring a solution. Therefore, I would encourage councillors, please oppose this amendment.
Again, Councillor Fairweather, do you wish to speak now or later in the debate?
Later.
Thank you, in which case we move to a vote on the amendment in the name of Councillor Henwood, those parts which have not already been accepted on the paper in front of you. All those in favour? We are taking a vote, but I will take the point of order. So, is the point of order a clarification of what we are voting on?
It's just a clarification of that you're raising your hand in the event of a tie, it would count, but if not, then it doesn't.
Okay. I'm not raising my hand in the event of a tie. If there is a tie, I will have a casting vote. Have we counted? Yes. All those against? Okay, thank you. And any abstentions? Thank you. The amendment is carried. We now have the second amendment. I apologise. The second amendment is in the name of Councillor Ottino. Introduce it.
Thank you. Those of us regularly in contact with our constituents will be aware of the great deal of anxiety the proposed changes to winter fuel payments have caused to many pensioners. What is not in dispute is that universal winter fuel payments are not necessary for all. It is not right that benefits are paid to those who have the level of wealth and income that they can easily afford the extra heating and fuel costs that might be incurred by being of pensionable age. Some of that anxiety will be reduced by the confirmation of the commitment to a triple lock that the state pension is due to rise by 4%, £460 a year in April 2025, and is expected to rise by more than £1,000 a year over this Parliament. Anxiety will be further reduced by the plans for clean homegrown energy and the planned support for the upgrading and insulation of low carbon heating for millions of homes that will further reduce fuel bills for good. And it is our responsibility as members to make sure constituents are aware of all this information. Nevertheless, I agree that the cut-off at the level of the receipt of pension credit is not the correct level, and the fact that the cut-off is immediate rather than staggered is also not correct. And members of this party are calling on the Chancellor to review both these decisions. Thank you to the council officer who immediately responded to this by encouraging the take up of pension credit, and we all have a responsibility to pass this information on how to do that on to our residents. Benefits should be in general be awarded on the basis of need, and the payment of taxes should be in general related to the individual's ability to pay. The bizarre solution proposed by the Lib Dems does not stick to these principles, and we cannot support it. Their solution would mean that some citizens on reaching retirement age would receive an immediate increase in the tax they would pay. Welcome to and enjoy your retirement. Their solution would mean some pensioners would be paying a higher rate of tax than non-pensioners on the same level of income or wealth. That's hardly fair. Yes, we need to send a clear message to the Chancellor, calling on her to review her proposals. There is a problem, but no, the Lib Dems proposals here are not the solution. Please support our amendment.
Councillor Relton, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Thank you. Are there any points in the debate on this amendment? Councillor Muddyman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The issue with the Labour amendment is that it argues against the principle of universal benefits. Universal benefits are fundamentally a good thing. They are often cheaper and more effective at alleviating poverty than means testing. With many aspects of welfare, when you means test, you end up with a cliff edge for those who fall just outside the criteria. Even with a graduated system, if it still relies on people actually making a claim, there will always be some people who fall through the cracks and don't apply for what they're entitled to. Also, we know that there are many, many people who don't claim pension credit despite being eligible. Some because for whatever reason they feel they don't need it, some because they don't know they're eligible, but also some because they see the process as too complex to engage with. Beyond this, one thing that we should note about universal benefits is that they are much more resilient to cuts and contribute to better social cohesion. It's no surprise that the elements of the welfare state that the Tories were able to decimate in their time in office are those that are means tested, not those that were universal. We should be working to protect these universal benefits, not to undermine their future. So please vote for the motion which rightly condemns this cut, which will push more people into poverty and mean that they are unable to heat their homes. But we will be voting against this amendment to reject the idea that means testing of benefits is always a preferred approach. Thank you.
I saw Councillor Rahman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, Louise. Very well put. I think, with the Labour amendment, I think it's disgusting that you, as a Labour administration, would contemplate even talking about this right on the edge of winter. Surely a more plausible action would be that we need to save this money. Like I said earlier, 1.4 billion over this winter, which is not going to happen, which is the most likely outcome, surely could have been delayed. And the stuff that Councillor Tina mentioned about carbon homes, green homes, I mean, pensioners are, you know how old are they? Some of them are 80 years old. They're not going to last this Parliament. What about those people? This is hitting hardest the most vulnerable. It's going to stress them. And the mental stress that this policy is putting on people is disgusting, it's disgraceful, and you all know it, so just say it. So that's why I'll be voting against your amendment.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I am going to be supporting the Labour amendment. This isn't an easy issue. But what I would remind councillors is of a Joseph Rowntree Foundation report this year, which looked at those people in this country most in poverty. The most vulnerable people, the poorest people in the society, are people with young children, particularly those with 3 or more children. In fact, pensioners, together with working-age adults with no children, are those who have the lowest rates of poverty. Now, while I fully accept that by cutting the winter fuel payment, it won't automatically mean that money goes to children, people who have suffered because of the wicked
two-child benefit cap. It means that it will be longer and it will be much more difficult in our current straitened financial circumstances to actually give that money to children in our society. And I have to say that I do find the argument that is often used, and one that Councillor Raymond has used, quite frustrating. The argument that is always used is that, well, old people have paid into the system all their lives, they've worked hard. Yes, of course they have, and I'm not disputing that. But when you use that argument, younger people, people in poverty with families, will always lose out simply as a result of age, however hard they work. So what I'm saying is, I think in the current awful financial situation that we find ourselves, reluctantly, we should support this motion, and I think the suggestion of staggering is a sensible approach, because unless we start doing this, we're putting off the moment for doing something that we know will be the biggest factor in lifting families and young children out of poverty. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yes, it was a small point. I was a little confused by Councillor Muddiman's speech in opposition because it seemed to suggest that it was the Labour amendment that introduced the notion that benefits should not be universal. Now, there's a very good argument to be had about the pros and cons of universal benefits, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody had read the original motion. So the original motion includes the words, "Many agree that universal winter fuel payments are not necessary." So there's a kind of a starting point in the original motion. It then goes on after the paragraph which has just been deleted through the previous amendment. Council further believes that the threshold for the receipt of any benefit should be staggered rather than immediate. So that's the original motion. So the original motion already rejects the notion of universality. So if the councillor is going to...
Lord Mayor, can I use a point of personal explanation to explain that that isn't what the original motion said? Sorry. The paragraph you're reading there that's about staggering is one from the Labour amendment. Oh, yes, it is.
The piece of paper...
Can we... could you clarify which sentence you're referring to?
I am referring to the piece of paper headed Winter Fuel Payments, square brackets, with IOA amendment, which I would assume is the text of the original motion with the paragraph subtracted by the IOA amendment. In that text, it says, Council further believes that the threshold... So I am not reading the Labour amendment. Now, I appreciate if there has been a drafting... no, what would it be, a printing error?
Can I try one more explanation, because I know the answer now? The answer is that that is a paragraph from the original Labour amendment, which I accepted. So it is a paragraph that you wrote and then that I accepted.
Right.
Thank you for the... Thank you for the clarification, right. Everyone.
So, just to be entirely clear then, thank you very much for that. To be entirely clear, it is the motion now as a whole to which Councillor Muddiman has an objection, not just our amendment, albeit that Councillor Smelton has perhaps inadvertently introduced a paragraph through his willingness to be collaborative, which Councillor Muddiman and possibly the rest of our group finds objectionable, and therefore he has lost himself support rather than gained it, which is tragic, and I can only apologise for having led him astray inadvertently.
Councillor Turner. Councillor Turner?
Sorry, microphone woes. Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. I mean, three quick points, if I may. I mean, one, in response really to Councillor Raymond, fairly strong tone being taken today, and I understand that, but I think what you're seeing in this actually is us saying we do want to offer some criticism, we do want to see things change. We're trying to think about, at the same time we're trying to advance the arguments on matters of fact, and, we have to acknowledge, for example, that there's a significant commitment to pensioners. There are some organisations that campaign for young people who say, why have you got the triple lock, for that bit of society, not others? I think there's an interesting argument there, but that is there, the triple lock, so pension will go up. So you're trying to put things down on here which are reasonable. And again, I think what we were trying to do with the energy price cap as well, it's right to mention that the price cap is due to rise, and that is clearly a real worry for people. Totally get that. At the same time, we had that dreadful period when the fuel costs really went through the roof, and so we don't want to sort of alarm people unnecessarily. So it's partly about being fair, but to be clear, what is in this amendment is critical. So that was the first point that I wanted to make. The second was just that we are making some factual points. The third one, and it takes us a bit in the direction of those never-ending discussions about the merits or otherwise of universal basic income, where I strongly suspect Councillor Muddiman and I might have slightly different views, and probably actually a lot of people on this side of the council chamber would have different views. For me, I strongly endorse the point that benefits should be related to people's needs, and sometimes those needs are just going to be different by, for example, because of able-bodiedness or otherwise, for example, caring responsibility or otherwise, because of people's housing costs in different parts of the country, all of those things. And so I do think there is something actually, particularly in a time of constrained resources, where you will need to go for benefits which are focused rather than benefits which necessarily are universal. In an ideal world, you might not be. If you were starting off from a kind of state of nature, you might not do that. But in the circumstances we're in at the moment, I do think we probably need to have an element of reflection of need in that, and so that's why I feel perfectly comfortable supporting that bit of text in the Labour amendment in addition to the factual points, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Railton, you indicated you wish to speak now or at the end as seconder. Councillor Railton.
Okay, so I am one of 4 children. It will surprise exactly nobody here to learn that I'm the oldest of 4 children. We were raised for the earliest part of my life on one salary, mostly my dad's salary. A few years ago, I learned that for most of that time, my paternal grandmother's pension via my granddad was more than my dad's salary. I'm not saying this to make out that I grew up destitute, because I did not, but because there are a few uncomfortable truths here that need a bit of airtime. The generation that received the unmeans-tested winter fuel allowance is the wealthiest generation to have ever lived, and given current trends will probably be the wealthiest generation ever, with subsequent generations unfortunately being poorer than previous ones. This is driven by property wealth, strong equity markets providing huge returns on savings, and genuinely amazing defined benefit pensions. The triple lock has helped reduce pensioner poverty from 29% in 1997 to 16% now. This is not minimising the very real pensioner poverty that does still exist, and cliff edges in policies are problematic. However, I cannot support a benefit where 27% of it is going to millionaires, not while we have 30% of our children in poverty in this country. I cannot support a benefit that gives folks like Stanley Johnson living in the south of France a few £100 every winter to heat his home, while 150,000 children in this country are growing up in temporary accommodation. There are kids in this city growing up in hotels, and I'm literally here in this room because I don't think that we should ever accept things like that in our society. There's a real issue of intergenerational fairness here because, what does 30% of children living in poverty actually mean? It means working age families. It's those whose national insurance contributions are helping to pay for Stanley Johnson's heating. The I've paid into the system fallacy needs to die already. Our national insurance contributions pay for those less fortunate than us, those retired, and for the NHS as it should be. It does not go into a jam jar in the Treasury with Anna Railton written on it for me to draw down later. This is the social contract we've all signed up to, an understanding that the most help should go to the most in need, not to those who have most necessarily paid in the most. Thank you.
Councillor Jafari Mabini.
I find it quite interesting that a lot of the arguments from the opposite side is coming about how we should be protecting children and how we're affecting children's well-being. Well, the 2-child benefit cap is what I've got to say about that, because I do think it's slightly... I do think these arguments are slightly rich, talking about the children, when the Joseph Rowntree Foundation actually highlighted that 100,000 children will be left in poverty if we do not lift the 2-child benefit cap, which is actually a really disgusting, really discriminatory state of affairs. So I'm actually, as you know, I'm really interested in health inequalities, and there is a 15-year life expectancy gap between my residents in North Brook and residents in North Oxford. And all of the assessments that are coming around this pension cut sounds like it will actually worsen those life expectancy gap. Often people are, as you know, as we've already discussed, are really vulnerable. They're not applying for more benefits, going down to Agnes Smith that's already got a 4-week wait list. That is actually quite difficult for a lot of vulnerable people. And that is why universality is important. And it is about political choices, and Labour are making political choices that I think Gordon Brown would actually be a bit ashamed of. So if you look at, for example, we could actually tax, we could have a 2% wealth tax on assets over 10 million, and that will raise 24 billion, which will be, you can actually give that money to both, put that money towards both the benefit cap and the winter fuel payments, and you will have money left over. How much? We actually spent £12.8 billion in support of Ukraine. So there is lots of areas in which we are choosing to spend a huge amount of money. 12.8 billion, yeah. Not least the fact that the Prime Minister seems to be accepting the most donations to his own personal funds of tickets and freebies of £100,000, which is more than any other Labour Prime Minister ever, and more than any other leader of the opposition since 1997. So I will not be supporting the Labour amendment, and I will be supporting the motion as it is.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much. Welcome to new Labour government. Well, in my point of view, Labour died when John Smith died. You're dealing with a new Labour conducted by Mendelssohn, Blair and Brown. And this is, in my word, they are the champagne socialists. They have the mask on socialism, but they act like worse than the Tories. There's no denying what the Tory has done, the damage to the most vulnerable, poorer, and the other society, the imbalance they brought. But there is equally no justification to bringing these cuts on the old age pensioners, because where the Labour is now going, the new Labour, to go and tax the wealthies. No, they won't. They're wealthy donors, the other people, they're not going there. But where they're going is they're going, and I don't buy the argument where, yes, the numbers are, there are young people with young families in more poverty, so less balance. It is a responsibility of the states, okay? And rather than making the difficult decision and going after the wealth tax and the other stuff, you have decided to basically, in my point of view, rob the people who work very hard their life and who thought they may have a little bit flexible or easy life, comfortable life. No, because you decided to rob those people, and I will not be voting for this amendment.
Councillor Latif.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We had 14 years of Tory austerity and cuts to public services. Welcome to year 15, unfortunately. I'll be voting against this Labour amendment. The 4 bullet points at the top seem to suggest that actually we should be congratulating this Labour government, when the truth is the residents, and you might nod your head, Councillor Smith, but the residents of our city are appalled at what the Labour government is introducing. And the 4 bullet points are trying to suggest that actually generally the residents of the city will be in favour, and I think that patently is not the case when you speak to people on the doorstep. I'm surprised that several of our co-councillors on the Labour benches seem to present a false choice between supporting one vulnerable group, such as those on pensioners, versus another vulnerable group, which is people with children and those who are struggling with child poverty. And I think that's a false choice that's being presented to us. It's a false choice that's presented by the Labour government. It's a false choice that, unfortunately, many members of the administration seem to now be presenting to this council and to residents of this city. And we should reject that false choice, because there are other ways, other political choices that could be made by this government that don't impact the most vulnerable in society. And I suspect if you're spending or you're gifted a few £1,000s for buying a new dress, a new suit, or a new pair of glasses, you probably think a few £100s for, winter fuel payment is probably not that significant. We had years of Tory sleaze, and now what we're finding is that we have years, or we will have years, I'm sure, of Labour sleaze. It was often a retort from those on the administration benches during the years of coalition government that if you scratch the yellow below the Liberal Democrat, you'll get blue underneath it. I'm afraid if you scratch the red, you'll find that blue bleeds below it. And I hope that if this, whether this amendment is passed or not, that the same shameful behaviour that was presented from Labour MPs who cheered when this bill was passed in Parliament is not repeated in this council, because I have not come across any residents who feel that actually this is the sort of government that had been voted in, and this is not the sort of thing that should be cheered. And as I say, it's really utterly shameful behaviour from the Labour government, and we as a council should not be a mouthpiece for it.
Councillor Muddiman, I know you indicated, but our rules of debate only allow a councillor to speak once in a debate unless making a point of personal clarification.
I don't want to speak in the debate. I want to move a motion that we now move straight to a vote on this amendment and then speedily on to a vote on the whole motion.
Thank you, Liz. I have only one remaining speaker, Councillor Ros Smith. Are you willing to allow her to speak before moving to a vote?
If she can be brief, we'd just like to have time for the second. Sorry, Ros.
Yeah. If it is, thank you for the clarification. Since we have only one remaining speaker, I will use my discretion to allow Councillor Ros Smith to contribute briefly, I hope.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak and to actually welcome Councillor Clarkson's remarks actually about the two-child benefit. It's such a shame that her colleagues on the County Council did not support the Lib Dem motion with regard to getting rid of that two-cap benefit as promised by the Labour opposition group as they were at national government on the Green benches. It's such a shame that they did not support the Lib Dem motion to get rid of that cap. I agree totally with her that it's a very cruel cap to have, and with other members of this chamber that have talked about child poverty. I know all about that, having been a single mum and brought two children up. I welcomed the Labour government when it came in. What I did not welcome with Blair was continuing with the cuts to the family allowance, which made a cut in my benefit allowance at that time of £95 a month. That doesn't sound like a large amount of money, but when you're a single mum, it is a huge amount of money. What do I say to pensioners that have come and spoken to me personally in tears with regard to this Labour government's disgraceful wish to cut the benefit to pensioners? There are pensioners who are worried sick. They're not wealthy pensioners. And even though it has been mentioned, and quite rightly, that the majority of them perhaps are in your ward, there are those who are living in poverty and in rented accommodation in their 70s who are really worried about heating their homes. Some of them have disabled partners, which means they don't move very much, so heating is a very, very important part of their utility bills to keep an eye on. I do feel that this Labour amendment is very defensive, and that again reminds me of Labour amendments that I saw to motions in the 1990s and early 2000s. And I think it's a great shame to see this administration putting forward with these defensive amendments to the Lib Dem motion today. Please can we vote against this and vote for the motion as originally put, with the acceptance of the Labour amendment with regard to the Council further believes that the threshold for the receipt of the benefit should be staggered, as was highlighted by Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, your actual amendment that we accepted as part of our original motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for allowing me to speak for this length of time.
We have had a motion to move directly to a vote. Is there any objection to that?
On a point of clarification, Lord Mayor, do I get my right to reply or not?
Yes. Yes, we have, in which case we have three potential speakers. Councillor Ottino's right to reply, Councillor Smoton's right to reply, and Councillor Fireweather, if you wish to speak now rather than at the end of the main debate. You'll reserve your right. Okay, in which case Councillor Ottino and Councillor Smoton. Councillor Ottino.
Okay, as far as I've got my understanding right, we've already accepted the IOA amendment, which scraps the paragraph about the cost falling on pensioners. So that what we are proposing in addition is what is in red on this piece of paper, which are 4 bullet points at the top, which are facts. Whether we choose to note them or not, we don't, I guess we do, or we don't have to. The paragraph that states that we believe the basis for the receipt of all benefits should in general be related to individuals' need, and the payment of all taxes should in general be related to the individual's ability to pay. And then I think the other point is just a point of fact around the energy price cap. So that, I believe, is what we are voting on now, which is the difference between our amendment and the IOA amendment. So if you're in favour of putting those 4 facts in at the top, vote with us. If you're in favour of benefits being in general related to need, vote for us. On payment of taxes in general related to ability to pay, vote for us. And then there's another fact. Don't vote for another reason. That's what we're voting on.
Councillor Smoton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just briefly, before I use my right to reply, I will note that personally, I think we ought to hear the Campsfield motion, and that's because we've had our 3 public speakers who've attended for the purpose. I think it's something we should hear. I also note that whilst we're rolling up on the hour, we're also ahead of schedule compared to our usual. I will therefore, once we've got through this, if Council is in agreement, I would like to ask us to extend time by, I would suggest 15 minutes, so that we can hear the key points of the Campsfield matter.
I will second that when we come to it.
I hope people would support me in that. Right, okay, to briefly use the right to reply, pick up a couple of points. Councillor Ottino, thank you for your remarks about blending of benefits as opposed to cliff edges. I think that's quite right, and I think that is a shortcoming of the winter fuel payment, and that's absolutely right that we should be pushing against that with the government. I know you also said that you thought the level was incorrect. I wish you'd written that in the motion. I don't know now, actually, whether that's a Labour group position or whether that's just your position, but it's welcome, nonetheless. You mentioned some pensioners potentially getting an increase in tax when they reach pensionable age. I note that would only be the case for exactly the groups that Councillor Clarkson and Councillor Railton are complaining about, which is to say people who are unusually well off. They would be the only people who'd be paying more tax than they'd be receiving in the winter fuel payment. And the same thing goes for these remarks about pensioners having the lowest rate of poverty. That's quite right. But the people we are exclusively trying to help here are the people who should be claiming pension credit, but are not getting pension credit. They are the people who are the worst off by definition. If we can come up with a system which universally saves those people from this cut, then I'd suggest that ought to be done. And finally, Councillor Hollingsworth, when he's not stuck in the amendment labyrinth, is also tangling himself a little bit in semantics when it comes to universal benefits. In a system where one receives 200 quid in universal benefit and then is taxed 200 quid, has one received a universal income or not? Discuss. I'd suggest the really key thing here is there bureaucracy? Is there bureaucracy you have to complete in order to avoid a cut or not? That's the really, really key thing. And I think that is what defines universality and is the root of the complaints about that. Anyway, to very briefly sum up, we can see what's in front of us. We've discussed it plenty. I would personally particularly object that paragraph 2 has been inserted that gives a glowing endorsement of various tangentially related government projects, most of them inherited, given we haven't had a budget yet. Councillors, I would suggest we shouldn't be using this council's voice to give Sir Keir a pat on the back. If you don't like the motion, vote no. Don't let this amendment twist it into being a bonus Labour motion. They can wait their turn just like everybody else. Councillors, please reject this amendment.
Members, we now move to a vote on the amendment in the name of Councillor Ottino, minus those points already incorporated into the main motion. Can I see all those in favour? Can I see all those against? Seeing none, the amendment falls. We will now move into debate on the main motion incorporating the first amendment. Do I see any members who would like to speak? Seeing none, I call on Councillor Fairweather, seconder.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I speak as one of the few councillors present in the chamber to actually receive the winter fuel payment. I'm lucky. I don't need this payment. Like others in my ward, I donate it to a good local cause which desperately needs the money, due in no large part, to long-standing underfunded by this Labour administration. There are, however, other pensioners in my ward who will struggle without the winter fuel payment. I do find it amazing that a Labour government should pick this payment for cutting. It was, as has already been stated, Gordon Brown, as Chancellor, who introduced this help for pensioners in 1997 as one of the first things the incoming Labour government did. It's ironic that another incoming Labour government should choose to remove it from most recipients. I'm beginning to wonder if this country has got rid of one Tory government only to replace it with another one, albeit with a red tinge. However, as Councillor Smoten has already pointed out, many thousands of elderly people in Oxford will see a cut in their income this winter. Some, like me, will be able to cope with this change, but there will be many for whom it will add another burden at a time when many other costs have risen sharply, like the fuel cap. The OECD confirms that pensioners in the UK already receive lower state pensions than many other countries in Europe, no matter what measure is used. The percentage of GDP is one example of this. 7% in Spain, 9% in Germany, but only 2% in the UK. Or perhaps you prefer the ratio of pre-retirement earnings to post-retirement income. 82% in Spain, 75% in France, but only 29% in the UK. The pension and benefit system in the UK is hideously complicated and costs the council and government nationally large amounts to administer the many means tests that are used. I support Councillor Smoten's suggestion that the tax system should be used rather than of means testing for things like pension credit. I would personally add several other benefits like council tax reduction and warm homes discount scheme. This would benefit the poorest pensioners directly and ensure that pensioner poverty was reduced and brought more into line with other developed countries. This would save a great deal of the administrative costs, as better off pensioners would then automatically pay tax on this income or their wealth without needing further bureaucracy to process claims based on eligibility. I too welcome the efforts council officers are making to raise awareness of pension credit and other linked benefits amongst pensioners in Oxford, but would point out that if the basic pension included pension credit and other benefits, they would not have to spend time doing so. I ask you to support Councillor Smoten's motion and commend it to you. Thank you.
Councillor Smoten to sum up.
Oh, well, I've only got a 5,000-word speech for this bit. No, I'm not. Please vote for the motion.
Commendably short. All those in favour of the main motion, please show. We are voting on the main motion as amended by the first amendment, but not the second. Okay. Against? Seeing none, any abstentions? Thank you. The motion passes. We now move on to motion B.
Lord Mayor, as discussed, I propose to extend time by 15 minutes.
Thank you. Sorry. Sorry, I'm being...
We've got 2 left on the clock. I'm going to propose 15.
If we are going to extend the time until 9 o'clock, which is the end of the meeting, we will have to be very disciplined in speaking on the amendments and the motion. If we're prepared to do that, I really would like to see this motion debated in council.
Yeah,
yes,
I propose it.
We have about 20 minutes to do that. I second. Is that okay with members of council? Good. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In the interest of brevity, given the 3 fantastic and important public speeches we've had today, I shall try and keep my remarks very brief. Firstly, I need to thank the Oxford Community Independents for their friendly amendment, the text of which I believe will be circulated shortly. This makes an amendment to the text under point 3 of Council believes, basically to make the important point that immigration detention is not just cruel and incompatible with our city's values, but also inefficient and expensive, as pointed out in the Shaw reviews. We all know that extensive evidence has demonstrated the harm that sites such as Campsfield House cause. These spaces are sites of violence, and we know that the last time there was an immigration removal centre in this space, multiple residents took their own lives in response to the conditions. This is why so many of us were so proud to see the residents of this city and the county more broadly stand up and call for the closure of this vile institution. We were once again proud to see this council take a stand against the reopening of Campsfield House in 2022. And I must say, I'm very happy to see the consistency of the Labour group in speaking out against their own government's plans to reopen the centre as recently as August of this year. That consistency in their values is commendable and it is welcomed. And I also welcome the letters which we saw circulated during the course of this meeting. Nonetheless, I think it's important that this council, as the political voice of this city, speak again. As a city of sanctuary, we've made commitments to protect sanctuary seekers. Of course, the proposed site does not fall within the city area. However, its impacts will reverberate across this city and the broader community, making sanctuary seekers less safe and contributing to the dehumanisation of migrants and marginalised communities. We cannot ignore the context within which this reopening was confirmed by the government. It was confirmed in August, in the immediate aftermath of far-right riots across the UK.
It is my contention that the kind of dehumanisation wrought by the use of immigration detention fuels the far right, legitimising the confected idea that migrants and asylum seekers are a threat to this country. When far-right activists set fire to hotels and rioted in our streets, some of them were heard to chant, "Stop the boats," their narrative a direct lift of stated government policy. The narratives that politicians and the media generate form how we all understand one another. The response to far-right violence should not be concession or compromise. We must reject the racist and Islamophobic logics that threaten our communities, and that starts with taking a stand against dehumanisation and performative cruelty of the kind that immigration detention facilities are. I hope we can start that today. Let's pass this motion and make our city's stance clear once again. Please vote for the motion today. Thank you.
Councillor Jafari Mabini, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right. Thanks, Lord.
Thank you. I'm begging officers' pardon. I have seen a reference to amendments on this, but they don't appear in the papers. There are no amendments. That is excellent. In which case, I was about to say, would anybody like to speak in the debate? And you are first.
Councillors, the motion before us today rightly refers, and we've just heard right now about this city's and this council's proud record of supporting and welcoming refugees and asylum seekers. It also alludes, but in less detail, to the previous government's appalling record on immigration and asylum. Councillors will remember the Randa scheme, which is mentioned in the motion. As someone who visits Dorset regularly, I recall the hulk of the Bibby Stockholm anchored in Portland Harbour as part of the Tories' commitment to what you rightly just now called performative cruelty when it comes to asylum seekers. And of course, one of the frontrunners for the Tory leadership right now is the man who felt it worth spending public money to paint over cartoon murals in a young asylum seeker centre in case frightened children should find them too welcoming. So it was for precisely those reasons that so many of us 3 months ago were so glad to see the back of a government which would gladly do that kind of thing. And that, of course, is why it's so disappointing to see the Labour government that replaced it not changing direction as wholeheartedly as would have been hoped in these issues. To be sure, the Randa scheme is gone, but for those of us here in Oxfordshire, as we've heard so eloquently this evening, the prospect of the reopening of Campsfield, whose closure many of those here in the council chamber campaigned for back in the day, is, as the motion suggests, a worrying sign of the government's direction of travel on this matter. And in a context where this country saw and where this city was threatened by anti-asylum seeker violence over the summer, it behoves this council to unambiguously pin its colours to the mast. Reopening Campsfield is a step in precisely the wrong direction, and for a Labour government to be proposing it is deeply concerning. We should pass this motion, we should pass it overwhelmingly, and we should make it clear that this City Council stands with asylum seekers and with all in need. Thank you.
I have seen councillors Arshad, Azad and Rayman, and councillors Malik and Mundy. I will draw a line under the debate there because we won't have time to take anybody else. So, councillor, you will have to speak very quickly, I'm afraid. I think we have about 10 minutes points in debate, so 2 minutes each, if that's okay. Councillor Arshad.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. With deep concern for the families who have come to the UK fleeing violence and persecution, they arrive here seeking safety. They're not as statistics, but as human beings with hopes and dreams, just like all of us. The recent decision to reopen and expand Campsfield House as a detention centre is troubling. For many, Campsfield symbolised hardship, and expanding it only risks prolonging the suffering of those who seek refuge. The individuals who will be detained there are not criminals. They have escaped unimaginable difficulties, looking for compassion and a chance to rebuild their lives. Instead, they face indefinite detention, isolated from their families and from society. This is not a question of impact on the local community in Kidlington or Oxford, but a moral one. Do we want to be a community that turns its back on the vulnerable, or do we extend our hand in support, ensuring that asylum seekers are treated with dignity and respect? Oxford City Council has opposed this move, as Campsfield has a painful history of both protests, legal challenges, and even suicides. We do not need to return to that era. Instead, Campsfield Reimagined project proposes redeveloping the site into affordable housing, benefiting both the community and those who seek refuge. The Home Office must cancel the reopening, create more legal pathways for asylum seekers, and provide safe routes. And let us be supporting them with a compassionate community committed to justice and humanity. Thank you.
Councillor Azad.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I fully support the motion for keeping the Campsfield House closed. Oxford is a city of sanctuary. Both the City Council and the County Council have committed themselves to the City of Sanctuary program of keeping the refugees safe and stand for the right of those seeking sanctuary in this city. I am speaking from my personal experience of working for 4 years in Campsfield House as a race relation officer, and where I also had the opportunities to see the other in detention centers like Yarwood House in Bedford and Oakington House in Cambridge. The Yarwood House in Bedford actually had the young children with their parents in detention as well. Horrendous. Now, the conditions that these centers was kept in was bad, but the mental health condition of the detainees was horrendous, keeping them detained with a sort of uncertain life, for longer periods, long periods. There was daily violence which wasn't reported. While my work there was the Campsfield House was put on fire. There was fights every single day, which was never reported to the press or the public. Working there for the custody officers was very, very difficult as well. But the condition, the mental health condition was the one that affected me, that was actually personally as well. I urge this council to keep the Campsfield House closed and make sure that it never is open again.
Councillor Rehman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Everything we do is a choice. So this Labour government now has decided to open Campsfield House, where for years we've been arguing, part of the Labour Party that I was as well, that the people that seek refuge, and remember, I don't like the word refugee, they're just human beings, just like you and I. They're just people. They're not anything different, they're not anything special, but they've had a hard time. And they come to this place to look for sanctuary. We're a city of sanctuary. So many times we've looked at, let these guys work, contribute. We were talking about the previous motion, about choices, income, how much money we get. These people are here, they're struggling, they want to incorporate themselves within our society. Imprisoning them, because that's what you're doing, you're imprisoning them, is not what humanity is about. It's certainly not what I signed up to. It's not what I will sign up to. That's why I will support this motion. And just to be clear, the Tory government has called this inhumane. It's called it inhumane. So, as Councillor Arshad said, I find it troubling. But actually, I find the words that the Labour admin are saying troubling as well, because words like disappointing and troubling don't go far enough. It's a scandal on the scale that you can't imagine. this government is going to be responsible for the mental stress for all these people. I'm not going to take up time on where these people come from and what our foreign policy is. That's a debate for another day. But if we side with humanity, we need to condemn this opening in the strongest terms. It's not disappointing, it's bloody disgraceful.
Councillor Mundy.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Yeah, so obviously people have talked about the conditions in the detention centres that have existed and have existed before when Campsfield was previously opened. Talked about the impact of mental health on people who are there, who are also potentially going to be sharing those facilities with time-served people who've been convicted of criminal offences, could include violent offences, and this is a disgraceful way to treat people. I did actually want to sort of, in some ways, follow up from what Councillor Raymond's just said. I do think that this country does have an obligation to look after refugees, and that is not just on a humane level, but on the level of our own impact on the international sphere. Historically, we have to look at our own country's complicity in foreign wars and crises, obviously including Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, the current situation where we are backing the state of Israel while it engages in conflict with 6 other nations in the last year. And the impact on human suffering and forced migration of those things is absolutely enormous. We have to understand as well that the impact of asylum seekers on this country is greatly exaggerated by the right-wing press. We take on fewer refugees proportionally than countries like Germany and France in this continent, but also countries such as Turkey and Lebanon, by the way, which used to have the biggest, and probably still must have, the biggest population of refugees per head of population in the entire world. And we cry about these small numbers that we end up at our shores in small boats. It's absolutely absurd and disgusting. And also, I think we should bear in mind the stark contrast in the treatment of Ukrainian refugees who are welcomed with Houses for Ukraine. In some ways, actually, what we see there is a blueprint for how we should treat all refugees. And I think we should understand that, we are invariably talking about black and brown people from the global south, from the Middle East, and it is quite disgusting, really, that difference in treatment that we see to have people detained in that way when we are trying to get people to house people comfortably in our homes because they're white people from Europe, basically. So that's all I have to say on it, and thank you for bringing the motion.
Councillor Jafari Mabini, reserved your right.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for bringing the motion, and especially thank you to all the contributions, especially Councillor Azad, who really highlighted what it's like for the workers, and they are also dehumanised by working there, including the healthcare workers who have to sign these people off as fit to travel, and often they're not, and they are put in a terrible position, often outsourced as well. So thank you for highlighting that. And I want to say a big thank you to the council officers who are now doing the work, Stephen Cohen and his team, who are doing the work of the City of Sanctuary with the motion that we brought in 2018. So I'm really glad to see that work coming forward, and a big thank you to all of them. So we're strongly opposed to the use of immigration detention. It puts Britain to shame. It's unfair, it doesn't work, and it's cruel. Immigration detention causes real distress and anxiety for individuals and families, and I'm clear that indefinite detention of people in the asylum and immigration system must end. That's Annalise Dodds, Labour MP, 2017. And I would just like to say that hypocrisy, whether on this or the two-child benefit cap, which was vehemently opposed and is now being continued, is actually probably one of the top things that our residents talk about. You know, they will discuss various positions on policy, but they really dislike politicians being dishonest and being hypocritical. So I just would really urge the Labour MPs and both our MPs, Leila Moran and Annalise Dodds, to join these efforts, because that is the stance they had on it before they were in government. So I personally first became familiar with Campsfield House because I was a visitor with Asylum Welcome, and I visited young fathers, friends, husbands and uncles who were suspended on uncertainty for months and years in the detention centre. But let's just say what it is. It is actually a prison. It's a prison where prisoners were mainly paying for the crime of migration with little dignity, hope and certainty. We've already heard from the lady about the situation with carers. So there is actually an absurd hostile environment in this country, and there is an inhumanity around our Kafkaesque asylum system, which seems to be continuing. And it really has no bounds. There was a young Afghan man who had physical signs of torture with a brother in Birmingham who just wanted to join his brother, make a life in the UK, heal from the torture and trauma he'd suffered. There was an older Kurdish man with diabetes and mental health disorder who was struggling daily with terrible pains for which he only had access to paracetamol. And this was all laid out in the Tory-led Shaw reviews. The council, as I just highlighted it all. And there were often no necessary reports done when people were suicidal. So criminalising those seeking sanctuary, those having to leave beloved homes and families that they have no choice, has been a long-standing performance of cruelty from successive governments, with constant fanning of the flames of racism and xenophobia. The racism and dehumanisation of often racialised black and brown Muslim men and women shown by this Labour Party, whether it's on its refusal to ban sales of all arms during a genocide perpetrated by Israel, or dehumanisation of millions of Palestinian and Lebanese who are displaced, their leaders' comments that Bengali Brits should be sent back, or the reopening of the detention centre is horrifying, and it's a source of fear for those of us with communities and skin in the game. These are political choices being made by this Labour government to divide our communities, never mind the impact on the residents of the city or the people that are going to be held up inside. This is a cruel gimmick. Immigration detention is a circle of violence, is inhumane, wasteful, and makes a mockery of Oxford, a city of sanctuary. Even the Tory reviews recommended the closure of the centre, and now a new Labour government reopens this prison, and it points to their corruption and deceit. The government wants us to blame each other, migrants just like myself and my co-workers in the NHS, and the carers, for the long waiting lists and the high cost of living, rather than their kowtowing to massive corporations whose interests they serve. Please support this motion.
We have 3 minutes remaining, which is just nice time for Councillor Powell to respond to the debate.
The only response I can give is to thank colleagues from around the chamber for their contributions, particularly Councillor Azad for that speech about your experiences within visiting the centre. But I think the tenor of this debate has been incredibly moving to see, in effect, the fact that people from different parties can come together to agree on what is ultimately a moral issue. I wish it were that national level politicians could exercise this same level of quality debate. That's all I have to say.
We therefore move to a debate on the motion. All those in favour, please. Sorry? What did I say? Oh, we therefore move. Sorry, my apologies. It's got so late in the evening. I can't get my words out. We move to a vote on the main motion. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. And well, it's clearly overwhelming, but for the record, anyone against? And any abstentions? 2. Okay. Thank you. The motion is passed overwhelmingly and the meeting is concluded.